to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! This is a podcast based on a blog of the same name because there are at least 100 reasons why we wouldn't change our name in such a manner. Though we're closing in at about 70 episodes, hooray! My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out the blog at couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For at Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the blog or the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and via Google Play to stay on top of brand new episodes. Around the water cooler and in an ongoing fashion, we discuss a variety of shows, including but not limited to Doctor Who, Downton Abbey, How to Get Away with Murder, Broadchurch, New Girl, Game of Thrones, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, American Horror Story, The Vampire Diaries, Gotham, Supernatural, the Arrowverse shows, including Arrow, The Flash, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, and Supergirl, and The X-Files, new panels covering Stranger Things, and a new series examining Gilmore Girls, including the Gilmore Girls reboot A Year in the Life, and Sherlock. And because we also look back at shows now past, we're going to look back at Glee. What's more, CPU from time to time goes live. We've appeared at Comedy Outlet Mondays at Dog Story Theater and at Grand Rapids Comic-Con in Grand Rapids, Michigan, while streaming live on Facebook. More live appearances are being planned, so make sure you like us at our Facebook page, our Twitter, follow us at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, and or our Pinterest at CPU Podcast, or subscribe to the blog, our YouTube channel, our iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Play. In the meantime, if you don't hear your show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we're always seeking new panelists, so if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any one of those outlets aforementioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback, as long as you're not going to try to float us off the ark. Today, we're around the water cooler and reflecting upon Season 1, as well as recapping Seasons 2 and 3 of The 100. Season 1 aired from March 19, 2014 to June 11, 2014. Season 2 aired from October 22, 2014 to March 11, 2015. And the third season aired from January 21, 2016 to May 19, 2016. The 100 is set 97 years after a devastating nuclear apocalypse wiped out almost all life on Earth. The only known survivors lived on 12 space stations in Earth's orbit prior to the apocalyptic event. The space stations banded together to form a single massive station called the Ark, where about 2,400 people live under the leadership of Chancellor Jaha, played by Isaiah Washington. Resources are scarce, so all crimes, regardless of their nature or severity, are punishable by ejection into space or floating unless the perpetrator is under 18 years of age. After the Ark's life support systems are found to be critically failing, 100 juvenile prisoners are declared expendable and sent to the surface near former Washington, D.C. in a last-ditch attempt to determine whether Earth is habitable again in a program called the 100. The teens arrive in a dropship on a seemingly pristine planet they have only seen from space. They attempt to find refuge and supplies at an old military installation, Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, located in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. However, they land some distance from the intended target and soon face other problems. Confronting both the wonders and the dangers of this rugged new world, they struggle to form a tentative community. The teens soon discover that not all humanity was wiped out. Some survive the nuclear apocalypse, the Grounders who live in clans, locked in a permanent power struggle, another group of Grounders who become cannibals, known as Reapers, and mountain men who live in Mount Weather, who lock themselves away before the apocalypse and who are killed by the residual radiation if they go outside. In the second season, the remaining 48 of the 100 are captured and taken to Mount Weather by the mountain men. It is eventually revealed that the mountain men are transfusing blood from imprisoned Grounders as an anti-radiation treatment. Medical tests of the 100 show an even more potential anti-radiation efficacy. Their bone marrow will allow the mountain men to survive outside containment. Meanwhile, the inhabitants of the Ark have successfully crash-landed various stations on Earth and begun an alliance with the Grounders to save groups of people, naming the main settlement at Alpha Station Camp Jaha. In the third season, Camp Jaha, now renamed Arcadia, comes under new management when Pike, played by Michael Beach, a former teacher and mentor of the 100, is elected over Kane, played by Henry Ian Cusick, as Chancellor and begins a war with the Grounders. An artificial intelligence named Allie, played by Erica Serra, is revealed to be responsible for the nuclear apocalypse that devastated Earth 97 years before the series begins, and she takes over the minds of nearly everyone in Arcadia and Polis, the capital city of the Grounders. A medium-sized but eager panel of Skaikru, including 2 frequent CPU panelists and 1 brand new voice, are gathered around the water cooler to catch CPU up on the conflicts between humans from sky, ground, and mountain in the 100, as we've not covered the show on the blog since Season 1. I think the panel is ready and raring to get started, so as always it should be noted that all of our panelists have viewed the entire series through Season 3 and may discuss sensitive plot points. So, for those of you who haven't watched any of the 100 and plan to catch up at some point, listen at your own risk, as there are going to be major spoilers. At this time, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. Those who are loyal to CPU should know the drill. And the seasoned panelists should know the drill. But to remind our new panelist and to remind the listener, this is what I'd like you to do. I'll need you to identify yourself by your first name, only your first name. We don't need to know your last name. Or a first name only kind of program here. And how you came to watch the 100, what made you start watching, how'd you find out about it, what kept you watching through to now, and then how would you rate your interest in the show? This is the CPU standard character question, though the question changes with each show we do. Are you ready for this, panel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very.
All right. So how would you rate your interest in the 100? Do you watch it because you love it or the idea of it? For you, the idea of teen characters taking charge and being responsible for the fate of humanity is something that is both novel and necessary, even as it may sometimes be sad or not ideal. You trust in the writer's vision for the show and love the strengths of the characters and of the premise behind the futuristic society being formed, especially the 100, the teen characters. You think it's a natural leader among shows of its genre or type, just like you. Like Clark Griffin. Do you watch it because you feel it is an outsider among current mainstream TV and you can relate to it as you feel like an outsider yourself no matter where you go? Or you're particularly intrigued by the characters who are grounders, like Octavia Blake. You watch it and love it, but for you it's not perfect. There are flaws and questionable decisions made by the characters, but your family watches it and you can't help but love it because they love it, like Dr. Abigail or Abby Griffin. Do you watch it because your sister or sibling watches it and you feel protective of your sister or sibling, for better or for worse, like Bellamy Blake? Do you watch it because you think the show at least tries to do the right thing by the story and the characters, though you are far too susceptible to the show's more dogmatic ways of portraying the story and character choices? Or you only watch it because your child watches it, like Thelonious Jaha? Do you watch it for the cool tech or innovations of the sci-fi story? Also, you don't care who knows you watch it because you are your own person through and through, like Raven Reyes. Do you watch it because you love the romances, like Clark and Finn, Clark and Lexa, Raven and Finn, Jasper and Maya, Monty and Harper, Lincoln and Octavia, Abby and Kane, etc.? Or they are the one bright spot in an otherwise dismal, gloomy, and intensely traumatizing set of storylines where loss and grief are commonplace? Though you are buoyed somewhat when the characters find love, what saddens you more and more deeply is the fact that people in love seem to lose those they love awful quickly on the show, like Jasper Jordan. Do you watch it because your best friend watches it and or because your best friend is sad and you want to make sure you're there for him or her, so you support them by watching the show, like Monty Green? Do you watch it for practical reasons or because your family and friends watch it? There are a lot of things you don't like about it, but you would do anything for the good of those you love, even ruthless things, including watching the show to make them happy, like Marcus Kane. You watch it but you don't like it, you disagree with many of the characters' choices or visions for how to do things, and frankly you were ever only in it for you. You think there are other better TV offerings out there, ones which won't leave you feeling you only need to survive them or that they will get you killed, or at least that they won't leave you feeling dead inside, like John Murphy. Or you don't watch it anymore because, spoiler, you died, like Wells Jaha, Cece Cartwig, Finn Collins, or, sadly, Lincoln. I know that's a lot of characters, but I actually limited it, so who would like to start?
Can I ask a question first?
You can ask
Who
a
is
question.
Cece Cartwig? I have seen the show how many times I don't know that name.
She was in the first season, and she, I think, was one of the adults who got culled in the culling.
Okay.
Okay.
I was like, I don't know Cece Cartwig. She doesn't show up in fan fiction. I don't know who she is.
She died before that came out.
Fanfic writers like to pull out a lot of random names from shows.
It's true.
On my rewatch, I was like, that's where that name came from. I thought you just made it up. Nope.
I think you should start.
Okay. Well, question: do I have to pick just one, or can I run through my I've changed?
Oh, you can do that. You can pick multiple. We actually have a notorious couple of panelists who like to pick multiples, so why not follow their lead?
Perfect.
All right.
Now, outside of my characters, what I say my first name and then...
And how you found the show, how you came to watch the 100, what kept you watching.
That's so mean.
She's a new panelist, listener.
No, but like the note-taking I relate to. That's great. Okay, continue.
All right, well, I'm Selene.
Hi, Selene.
Hi. And I came about this show through Tumblr because, as a lesbian on Tumblr, all of us know about every lesbian show. And the second Lexa showed up, everyone was like, there's this show. And I was like, I'm going to start watching it. So by the third episode Lexa was in, I was all caught up and I was like, this is awesome. And, it went from there.
Okay.
Why did I keep watching it? Well, Lexa, duh.
Okay.
Also, the show's really, season 2 was phenomenal, so I couldn't not watch. As for how I, character-wise, rate myself, started off as an Octavia. The show had lesbians on it, it had female leaders, it was it was new, it was different, it was awesome. So, started out Octavia, then season 3 happened. And my life changed. AKA, I became Jasper.
Oh, yes.
Everyone was dying. All of my the Grounders hold a special spot in my heart. Truth be told, I started learning Trigetish slang.
Oh my gosh.
It's impressive. I'm teaching her.
We speak it to each other.
Oh.
I'm not
minimal phrases.
No, I'm not very good. She's good.
I know, I'm not that good. I stopped after, it hurt. It hurt a lot. So I was a Jasper, and then I became Murphy. Because then I just got upset with everybody and everything that was happening, and I was like, and then I died. I became Lincoln. then I was like,
anymore?
no.
That's so
I literally finished this show to do this podcast.
Okay.
I had not watched past... I didn't watch past Lexa's death, but I kept up with it on Tumblr, so I knew everything that happened.
Uh-huh.
And then I caught up for this.
You had your own character development. I
It was a very, very painful time for me because I had started getting so many people to watch the show. I was like, guys, you need to watch this show, and I got 5 people at work to watch it. And then Lexa died, and
never mind.
So is this a Jump the Shark? Was that Jump the Shark? You're done with the 100 after this?
Wow.
I will follow what goes on through Tumblr, but I don't plan on watching it. It was
wow, strong feelings. Well, welcome to the podcast, Selene.
Thank you.
I imagine this is going to get feisty from your perspective.
Wee bit.
Okay.
As I said, you are more than welcome to cut out half my words.
I'm Allie.
Hi, Allie.
I'm like Selene. I started watching the show through Tumblr. I think it was around the time season 3 was starting to air, and I saw Lexa and Clark and just all of the good things that were happening, and I was like, well, might as well. So many people were talking about it, and usually that's how I start shows. And I liked the difference of it. I usually don't watch sci-fi shows because, in my personal opinion, I think they're not produced very well a lot of the time. I think the storylines focus more on the, actual sci-fi-esque, technology and not on the characters and how they work in that world. And I thought The 100 did a really nice job of making it a little complex they have a lot of characters, but they still managed to touch on them and that sort of thing. But character-wise, I jumped back and forth between Raven and Octavia a lot, but I think I'm an Octavia because I've loved her since day one, for starters. And also, I just love the Grounders. I like their, culture, almost, and I think it's unique to TV, so, yeah.
All right. Well, welcome back, Allie.
Thank you.
Hey,
Hey.
I'm Kelsey.
Hi, Kelsey.
You may recognize me from the other CW.
It's kind of true. Well, with
true.
Allie, you guys are like,
I know!
Yeah, like the Vampire Diaries and stuff.
Vampire
Watch it,
Diaries.
or listen to it.
And Supernatural.
Supernatural.
Yes.
I did not start watching this because of Tumblr.
There's another one of me.
I know. Yeah, you're welcome. I don't remember exactly how I first heard about it, but I know I started watching it on Netflix. I think it probably was I was watching like the Vampire Diaries or Supernatural, and they had a preview for either like further into season 1 or around season 2. And I was like, oh yeah, that looks cool, and I hardly ever watch live TV. So I found it on Netflix and started watching, and I actually only watched season 1 and 2 until I was like, yeah, I'll do the podcast, and then I had to watch season 3.
The feelings.
Right?
The feelings. So I think I kind of identify with the Octavia thing in that I really like the Grounders. I also really like her character a lot. I also really like Raven, but I don't think that I watch it for the tech aspects so much. But really, I'm kind of a Murphy. I don't even like Murphy, but I'm kind of a Murphy.
Right? You not love him?
Yeah, I hated him season 1. Season 2, season 3, my boy.
I loved him in the beginning of season 3, and then when he became so much of a survivalist, I was like, I don't know. Anyway.
So you don't like it anymore?
No.
Oh my. This is going to be a hot one.
It's impassioned. I'm ready.
All right. Well, welcome back, Kelsey.
Thanks.
Yeah. And as I babbled about in the intro, my name is Kylie, and I started watching The 100. This was one of the shows that if you listen to the podcast or you follow the blog or you know me personally, you know that I look to see what's coming out in a particular season, fall to spring season, and I saw The 100 was coming out, and I am a big sci-fi fan, regardless of how well produced it might be. So I thought, hey, I'll check that out. I have no idea what it is, but I'll check that out. The first season, I didn't love it. It struck me very much like a Lord of the Flies meets just really any teen dystopian story. You know, the Hunger Games, the Divergent series. It just was like all of that mashed together to me, and I was like, I don't know if I care about this so much until the very end of the season. The season finale kind of got me to keep watching. I did like some of the adult characters, not necessarily Isaiah Washington's character. We'll get to that in a minute. So I kept watching because I wanted to see what happened. Season 2 was phenomenal. That one made me like the show. Season 3, I don't think I hate it quite so much as some other people in this room. It was kind of a downer though, and it makes me wonder where they're going to go based on the ending, which we'll talk about. But if I were to rate my interest based on this very long list, and I'm sorry it was so long, but as you mentioned, there's it started off with 100 teen characters. Now, we didn't meet all of them, but yeah. I would probably say that, wow, that's difficult, even for me, and I wrote it. I would say that I watch it because I think the show at least tries to do the right thing by the story and the characters, and then I do think I get drawn into some of their more dogmatic concepts, so that would make me a Jaha, which is kind of ironic since I don't like him. I don't like the character. I know.
With me and Murphy.
I don't like the character, but if I were to, stick to my own description, that's where I think I would be. Because I can't say I love it. I like it. That's where I would go. So we're going to talk about this, and as I mentioned in the introduction, we're actually covering all 3 seasons individually, kind of like we've done with the originals or with Supernatural. There was a time when this was just a blog exclusively, and I actually covered these shows individually, and I did write an initial review about the 100, where I mentioned things like I thought it was Lord of the Flies, meets Hunger Games, meets whatever. But we're now going to talk a little bit about these seasons and kind of build up to seasons 2 and 3 and talking about them more in depth. We won't spend a lot of time on season 1. I don't actually think a lot happened in season 1 other than the kids landed and they survived, basically, and then the adults came down. But we can talk about some of the introductions and then go from there. Let's start with season 1, in which I, of course, if you listen to the podcast, you know I send out talking points, so everybody kind of got a cheat sheet. This is the season in which the 100 are sent to Earth for the very first time. So we meet the 100 and we meet everybody who's left on the Ark, and the Ark is still floating during that season in space. What did you think of this season? What did you like? What didn't you like? What were some of the things that stirred you or didn't stir you? Or yes, Allie, you don't have to raise your hand.
I know.
This is a podcast.
I have so many things.
Okay, opinions go.
Opinions. First of all, I hated Finn. I was so I was so happy when he died. Like, I've never been happier for a character to die in my entire life.
He didn't die till season 2.
I know. Spoiler alert. But it was like working up to that point. He was whiny, and I just didn't. I mean,
Preach, girl.
Whoa.
I appreciated what he did for Clark, because I think after her dad died, I think she felt very closed off from a lot of emotions and all of that sort of thing. And so he was like, hey, you can be a happy person, sort of, kind of, even though the earth is falling apart. And I think she found some of that. So that I appreciated from his character, and then what he did in season 2, which we'll get to. Yeah, so that was like my initial thought. I just didn't like that there was a romance like right off the bat. It just bothered me, because I've seen that so many times. I've talked about that in previous podcasts. I get tired of it, because it's very stereotypical, like, teenager show, I guess. And even though I'm a teen, trademark, I don't appreciate that always. So yeah.
All right.
So that's my thoughts.
I mean, I can definitely piggyback off of that. Like, I went through most of, like, I didn't have a boyfriend till, like, the very, yeah, I know, I had a boyfriend. It's fine.
Surprise.
Surprise! Woohoo!
This is going to be a very personal podcast.
But, you know, like, I made it through almost all of high school without a boyfriend, and you don't always have boyfriends. You don't always have significant others, and when they're not necessarily earned, when they're just happening for the sake of happening, it's not fun to watch. You're just like, oh, look, there's a guy, there's a girl, they're dating. I'm surprised. Or, I mean, you know, it can happen with lesbians and gay couples too, but it's just, for like, when there's not a, you know, there's not build up, or when it's just like, oh, look, we're gonna stick them together.
Exactly.
It gets tired and annoying.
I liked some things about season 1. Okay, Lord of the Flies is one of my favorite books.
See, yeah, I agree. I like Lord of the Flies.
Hey, it's not that I don't like it.
And I
thought
also-
it was derivative.
I understand. Yeah, definitely. And I also really liked the Hunger Games specifically. So for me, like, the whole, I mean, yes, it was derivative, but I was still interested in it. But one of the things that Selene and I were talking about when we were prepping ourselves earlier for this podcast is that I don't feel like there was enough of, like, a culture shock from these kids who have been living in space.
Oh, that's a very good point.
You know, now experiencing Earth for the first time, and there was wonder, you know,
Yeah,
like,
that was
wow,
like
this
when
is
they
so
walked
beautiful,
out, yeah.
and everything's so great, and then, you know, obviously they had their hardships and stuff, but, you know, like Selene pointed out when we were talking earlier about how they were experiencing weather for the first time. It was really you know, like, I think it could have been more interesting than giving us a romance right away and giving us some of the petty teen drama. It could have been more interesting to show them acclimating in general, and I really think more of them should have died.
Agreed. A lot more of them should have died. There shouldn't have been 48 by the end of the first season.
No, how you like them odds gives me hope for the apocalypse, man.
But I mean, a majority of the 48 didn't make it because most of the ones that did die died in the fight with the grounders at the end.
They didn't
Right.
catch any diseases or anything.
Right, like
Diseases, or, you know, like, they can't all have had great survival skills. I mean, yes, we learned later that they took, like, an Earth skills class, but we also learned they didn't really pay attention.
And that didn't come out till season 3.
Exactly.
So we don't know that in the
Right,
first
so we don't even know that in the first. So it's just interesting, you know, that all of them seemed able to have some kind of survival skills. Yeah.
Also, sunburn.
Yeah.
This just hit me in the head. Like, how did none of them get sunburned? Like, they should have all been crying, because I cry when I get sunburned. I'm like, oh, it hurts!
It could have been different, though, because they were in space, and, like, they talked about, like, the
Oh,
radiation
I guess.
thing. So maybe
I didn't
like,
think about that.
Way to explain it.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Sandra just
But you know, like, rain...
They show you the one scene where they're like, it's raining, but none of them got cold.
No, that's what I mean.
Y'all were running in the rain.
Froze to death, like, caught the flu or something and died. I don't know.
I mean, even if it's in summer, like, something.
Yeah.
Mosquitoes.
Or like,
where was their mosquito bites?
They all knew how to hunt, or like enough of them knew how to hunt to feed everybody. That just none of that stuff made sense to me.
Berries. How many of them? How come they didn't die on eating the wrong berry? I mean, I guess Wells points out the one time you shouldn't eat that,
Right.
but he didn't save everybody.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It was a lot of like certain key people in the group having these core survival skills, and then somehow 48 of them survived off of those key people's survival skills, which doesn't make sense to me, really.
And that's usually why I have such a hard time with sci-fi shows, is because they don't, like, they're sci-fi, yet they don't explain the actual science of it, which I'm not saying you have to get, like, super technical about it and be like, oh, like, the E equals MC squared, like, kind of thing. Like, I don't know. But they don't actually show you. And I think if you're gonna do something like that, for the sake of the audience, I think sometimes it's important. So...
But I don't think this is a matter of it being a sci-fi show that is kind of hinting at where Kelsey and Selene have been talking about. I think it's a lack of a story development. It's just pure story development.
And I mean, I get that they wanted to get rolling with the plot, quote unquote, the giant plot, but I still think they could have taken some more time to expose, like in Supernatural, when Castiel has this giant learning curve because he's an angel and now he's living with humans. Things like that I think could have been amusing. I mean, they could have even made it amusing. They could have gone dark with it if they wanted to. There's just a whole world of possibility that they didn't really explore.
Well, and it also would have given them an opportunity. So one of the reactions that I had to season 1, which I kind of hinted at, was that they're literally giving us, like, even if it's not purely 100, it was easily 25 characters.
Oh, yeah.
The regular ones and then recurring ones that have remained, recurring or regular since they were introduced. That is a lot of characters, and they literally did nothing to set the groundwork with them, aside from putting them in these random situations. And the random situations had nothing to do with what you're talking about, which is like being exposed to Earth for the first time. They were attacked by the grounders right away.
Yeah. Which shocked me, because, I mean, if you're thinking from a purely, like, strategic point of view, and I'm, say, we're the grounders, you're going to spend a lot more time watching them than automatically, I get he crossed some boundaries, but see where they're going. Like, this is new people you've never seen before. Why attack right away? Why not just play cat and mouse a little bit more?
Yeah, that's true. But I also think with the Grounders culture, they're very, like, I don't want to say barbaric, because I love them, but they are a little bit. Like, they have a lot of, like...
Like bloodthirsty.
Exactly. Like,
blood
yeah,
must have
I can't
blood.
think of the word, but they're just a little bit more...
No one had killed anybody yet.
That's true.
They hadn't shown that they were actually a threat.
But eliminate the threat before it becomes a threat.
Yeah. Which makes sense, I think, from their mindset as well. But it just, I don't know, it would have been nicer, I think, yeah.
And for me about the character thing, like, what would happen is, like, random characters that show, like, Harper, for example, got more pertinent to the actual story, but, like, characters like her, they just show up and they call them by name, and I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to know who that is, but, like, I don't remember, because it was such, like, ridiculous situations that were so small that they would show up in. Like, I don't even know how to explain it better than that.
I actually don't even remember Harper until season 3, when they start using her more. Like, they started using her in season 3. I was like, "What? Who is that girl?
Yeah.
We're supposed to know who she is." And I know that like, I recognized her, but I don't know. I'm bad with that anyway. Like,
I think her, like, big coming into the show was in season 2, which, again, we'll get to, but...
Was in Mountweather.
Yeah, in Mountweather. Yeah, that just always kind of bothered me a little bit, because I felt lost, but I didn't need to be lost, because they weren't really, like, important characters.
Well, and there were only really a handful of characters that clearly they were driving you towards learning about. You know, Clark, obviously, Octavia and Bellamy, obviously, Murphy maybe a little, even though he wasn't a regular back in season 1. He was a villain from the get.
Yeah.
You know, Jasper and Monty. It's basically, and Raven, and, you know, probably Finn as just kind of an accessory to all of that. And it's basically the same half dozen that are still around,
which is incredible odds.
I know, it is kind of incredible odds, but also it's like, I feel, and this is sort of hinting at, you know, two seasons or 3 seasons later, but I don't feel like I know any more about them now than I did when they first got introduced on the show, and that's a problem. And that was my immediate reaction watching season 1. Like, my initial review on the blog was, I don't know how I feel about this show. I don't know if I can keep watching. There's no enticement for me to want to keep watching 6 episodes, 10 episodes in. Like, I had to push myself to get to the end of the first season because I didn't feel any connection to any of these characters because they didn't take any time to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So,
and, like, the whole purpose of the story is having these kids who all committed crimes, and they would just, like, briefly explain what their motivation behind that was or something. But that's, like, the central point of the show. And
a lot of them were, like, really petty crimes, too. And I think it would have been more interesting to have, like real murder. Dysfunctional kids.
But in all fairness, though, I think the pettiness of some of the crimes was very interesting because you had people like Murphy next to someone who had stolen bread. Like, you know, you had these people who had such varying degrees. John Valjean. I hope one of them survives and shows up in 4 and is just like, I stole a loaf of bread. Why did all this crap happen to me?
Yeah, but I think it could have been more interesting if there were more incidences of that, I guess.
Well,
I'm not saying everybody had to.
There were a lot more. We just didn't pay attention to them. Like, all of Murphy's gang. There was that one kid who was, like, all down for hanging Murphy in season 1, who was like, let's hang him, and had his own little gang going, and then we don't see him again, ever. Like, I don't even know how they died.
I think they got blowed up in the Grounders attack.
That's fair.
And that doesn't make any sense, because if they were all murderers, they would survive.
They should be better at murdering. Right? You murdered once, you should be better at it.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I feel like the only character that I at least was motivated by from the beginning was Octavia. Like, I feel like she had a substantial backstory that they made a foundation out of, and then they moved forward with, and that I appreciated a lot. And also,
she was also connected to Lincoln, though, and like all of the Grounders, I felt instant connections with that I never felt with any of the Skaikru. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Instantly, I'm like, Lincoln's awesome. Like, he was still a villain, and I was like, I like him. He's cool. Anya, so badass. Like,
played by Dyken Lockman, who was on Dollhouse and on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
She's on Supergirl now, too, isn't she?
Is she?
Is she? I'm not up
I might have to find out.
I don't know. I don't watch the show, but I saw something last night on this CW. I'm pretty sure it was Supergirl, and she was on it. But
so one of the things that really started in season 1 and has continued kind of up and down is sort of this Clark versus Bellamy leadership thing. What do you think about the Clark-Bellamy dynamic, at least in season 1? It changes, obviously, later on.
Mixed feelings, because I hated Bellamy in his first season. He just rubbed me the wrong way so much. But their dynamic was such an interesting dynamic. And going back and forth and volleying over how to lead, and, you know, once again, the Lord of the Flies, like, we were sent down here to die by the people up there, so screw them, versus, no, you're just condemning them all to death. We can't do that. It was such an interesting dynamic, and I loved that dynamic between them. But I hated Bellamy for so long. And I mean, what I think is really interesting is even by the end of season 1, he becomes a better person through Clark. And their dynamic, when they're together, and he is trying to be, I think, the person that Clark believes he can be. He is such a good human being because he really does care. As much as he hates to admit he cares, he cares.
That's true, yeah.
So their dynamic is so interesting, and I do love the dynamic between them, especially in season 1. Season 1, I still hated him.
It's so interesting how the writers of this show used that, though, as, like, a plot point in multiple ways. Like, you had Bellamy and Clark, you had Jaha and Kane, you had, I can never remember her name, Clark's mom, Abby and Kane. You know, like, it's like, we always have to have two people who want to lead, and nobody can agree on how to lead. So,
which I think is realistic.
just listening to
It is. People are always fighting.
Which is maybe why I didn't question it until now when I was, like, listening to you talk about Clark and Bellamy, and I was like, God, they did that a lot.
But that I actually buy, because if we're taking it from a you're right, it's true to life, and it's the survivalist situation, and there's always going to be different schools of thought trying to rule the day. It's kind of interesting that it manifested in the teens first, because I think the adults were still agreeing at that point, or at least Kane was kind of being like, no, we're going to run out of air, we should call people.
But, I mean, Abby was still fighting for, like, give the kids time, and Kane was like, we don't even know if they're alive, and Abby's like, but we have to have hope.
Right, exactly.
Which is brought back in season 3.
It's true.
Nice find about that.
We'll bring the old time cemetery in a minute.
Or a lot of minutes.
A lot of minutes. Yeah, I have feeling season 2 is going to stir some feelings in this room.
I think Bellamy helped Clark make harder choices.
That's true.
Yeah, which for her was good because she was very, like, kind of yin-yang situation going on if you're talking about, like, a power struggle. I have to confess I did ship Bellamy and Clark for, like, 0.2 seconds.
I think they wanted you to.
No,
I feel like that's...
I'm still shipping them a little bit.
Like, it makes sense, but then Lexa came, and I was like, okay, it doesn't have to happen between Bellamy and Clark. Like, this is way better.
You remember that Murphy was made Agent Orange for the Grounders, trying to
Yeah.
infect.
I did find it very interesting how I felt that I cared a lot more about the kids on the ground than the parents in the Ark in season 1. Like, a lot of the times they'd go back to the Ark and I'd be like, God, again? Like,
Same.
because
Exactly
honestly,
the
I
same.
thought the adults acted more childish than the kids sometimes. And I was like,
That's actually what made them more interesting to me, though. Like, I agree that the situations themselves in space were boring.
well, I mean, they
kind of
were
repetitive.
not necessarily boring. I just found myself caring less.
Okay.
And I think because it was kind of such a repetitive thing. Like, they were just
Right.
always fighting about the same thing. Do we kill people? Do we not? Do we think the kids are alive? Do we care if the kids are alive? And the squabbling between them just it just irked me.
I agree. Yeah, every time there was an Ark scene, the only reason I really gave any, like, thought to it was because of Raven, but then she came down. I think that was in season 1.
It was.
Yeah, that she comes down, but then she's on the ground now.
Yeah, so we don't need to cut back.
So.
Well, I liked them because, first of all, Paige Turco, who plays Abby, she's from Person of Interest. I enjoyed her as an actress. Second of all, Henry Ian Cusick, who plays Kane, was Desmond on Lost, which is a very popular character and certainly one of my favorites.
I knew I recognized him.
Yes! He's the one with the consciousness thing. So, they were very appealing people. Isaiah Washington, not so much. Obviously, he's got a very notable history of using slurs and getting fired from Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he left Grey's Anatomy.
Ooh, that guy, Lick, he was also fired from The 100 because he was saying some things on Twitter.
That's why he's disappeared.
I wondered about
Yeah,
that.
which I didn't like his character anyway, so, it didn't
I would have liked
bother me.
an excuse for why he wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, no, he got in a little bit of trouble with PR, so...
Oh, well, there's a whole bunch that got into trouble during season 3, so...
Oh, all right. Well, let's hold that thought.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I actually enjoyed the adults' interplay a little bit. I sometimes felt that the kids squabbling was tedious, especially when it was Murphy versus Bellamy versus Clark versus, and then Finn would throw in his 2 cents, and that kind of got repetitive. I mean, I think the moral of how I felt about season 1 was that a lot of this stuff was repetitive. It would go up to the space, and then they would have this argument, and it was the same argument, then they'd come to the ground, and they would have the same argument, and the only variable would be what you both mentioned, or you've all mentioned, which is the grounders. And I think that's maybe why they ended up being the more relatable element, because they were consistent.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, consistent and also
and not whiny.
And not
so much whining.
That's true. There is a lot of whining for people whose lives are threatened.
Yeah.
Not enough doing.
Just try and survive, man. Don't worry about a boy or whoever it is. Like, it doesn't matter.
Although I got so angry at Bellamy when he kept trying to dictate, Octavia's love life, and it's like, dude.
Yeah, like, she's Octavia. Let her
She went to jail to get away from you. Not really, but just for fun.
True.
And you followed her.
Do you have any other feelings about season 1?
I think my only other feeling was I felt like they killed Wells real fast.
Yes.
They did kill Wells.
Well,
really
I upset about that, and I liked what Charlotte is that the
The little girl.
I liked her, and I thought it was interesting that they chose her to kill him, and I liked the reason. It all made sense to me, but I wish we would have got a little bit more of Clark reconciling with Wells first, and then I wish we somehow would have gotten more Charlotte character development before she just threw herself off a cliff. Like that element was interesting to me in season 1, and then it was done so quickly.
But I feel like that too. I mean, even though I loved Wells, I did like the way he died, which is twisted to say. But because it was sort of the first real shock, aside from the grounders, the first shock to like Clark, and because that's when she first gets really emotional, when Charlotte like jumps off the cliff or whatever, she's like crying and all of that sort of thing. So I liked that, but I do think that they should have kept Wells around just a little bit longer, because I liked his character, and I liked him and Clark and their like friendship thing. So
Well, and I think they ended up, although I don't remember when Jaha finds out, but I think it just ended up being a mechanism to motivate Thelonious Jaha.
yeah, that's true.
Less
as well.
than, but again, that kind of speaks to the character development piece, because that is something that I noticed. Like, that happened really quick. They're supposed to be friends from way back, best friends, and their families were friends, and you get so very little of that before it's like, and it happens in like the first 5 episodes.
Yeah. It was interesting to me, because I went back and started from episode 1 when I decided to catch up with 3, because I was afraid I wouldn't remember things. And then I ended up skipping over half of that season 2, because I was like, no, I remember all this. And I had no patience. But, yeah, stuff happened a lot sooner than I thought it did.
Yeah.
The second time I watched it, I was like, wow, really? Already? That's when that happened? And I don't know, maybe it wasn't so fast as I thought it was. It was just the second time watching it that I was like, wow, that seems fast. I don't know.
No, I think it was fast.
Okay, good.
I think so too.
I won't second guess myself.
Yeah.
Well, interesting fact, Eli Gorey, I don't know how to say it. The guy who plays Wells is still the top, it's like he's the second build for the 100 still. Like,
Really?
If you go look at it on Netflix, he's still number 2
Well, his
in the listing. And he dies in the first few episodes, and I'm like,
that's funny. His character is brought up a lot. Maybe that's why. I mean, like you
Or
said,
he
he's
just
kind
has
of
more credits as an actor, maybe.
than most of the parents.
But that
Maybe.
could be-
I don't know. Most of the adults, I guess.
Yeah, I have no idea.
That's
but
interesting. Netflix is strange, though.
that's true.
It is
Watch
strange.
them change this before it
Stranger
gets
Things.
released, and I'll be so wrong.
Or you might change it after it gets released, and you'll be like, yeah, I changed it!
So let's talk about season 2, unless
Sure.
you have something else to say about
Nope.
season 1.
Nope. Go.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Are you sure?
Nope. Continue.
Okay.
Final call.
Last call. So let's transition into season 2. And to start by doing that, I'm going to set up a little bit of what happens at the end of season 1. So essentially, the Grounders and the 100, they figure out each other is there, and they're immediately hostile towards one another. There's a big debate about who's hostile first, and I'm not even sure I remember which character started off the hostility. But there's a huge kind of battle on a bridge where the 100 has guns and makeshift bombs, and they kill a lot of Grounders.
How do they know how to make bombs?
Because
This is Raven.
Yeah.
Because she's so smart. Magically.
That's right.
That's part we skipped over.
That's so Raven. Sorry, I had to.
Yikes. So that happens, and then I don't even remember. You know what they don't really do is, well, we'll get to that. Okay, so in season 2, we start season 2, and what I was going to say is they don't really explain how everyone gets to the start of season 2 from the end of season 1, except for Octavia and Lincoln, because they go on the run. Lincoln's kind of treated as an outsider, and they fall in love because Octavia was sort of running after him for a while, and so they become a thing that is ousted from both camps, at least in their minds, if not in actuality. Okay. So the start of season 2, we have Camp Jaha, so all the adults make it to space. The Ark comes down. Jaha, they think, is left up in space and has died, although he hasn't. Spoiler, he's still alive.
Unfortunately.
I know.
The Ark comes down, and they set up camp. They call it Camp Jaha to name it after him because they think he's dead. In the meantime, the Grounders are like super pissed that their people have been killed, and they're ready to essentially declare war.
Because wasn't that when, I remember this, Clark, like, they did the thing with the actual station, like, where the initial camp was, and all the fire went out and, like, killed all the Grounders. That's what happened?
The dropship.
That's true. All of that.
Okay.
So, we'll get to the point at which Jaha comes back into the picture and the so-called quest for the City of Light, which also happens in this season. It's very packed. But at the very start of it, that's where we're at. And so some things start to happen, including the introduction. This is going to be a very popular subject on this panel. The introduction of the Grounders commander, i.e. the commander of all of the Grounder clans. There's one commander for all of their clans, and her name is Lexa.
Yay!
So tell me, how did you feel about season 2? What'd you like, what didn't you like?
So, like, my general...
What was a little battle of who's going to say what first?
No, go for it.
Okay, my general thoughts, like, the whole theme for me for season 2, Raven says something. It's between her and Clark's mom. I think it's when she's just gotten to the ground, and she says, like, Clark's just a kid, because it's when they're now having their, like, power battle thing, and Raven says she stopped being a kid the day you sent her to the ground. And I think, like, that's so relevant to the actual season, because it's a lot of hard decisions and it's a lot of death, and you see Clark start to crumble a little bit under that.
I should also mention before any other person jumps in, the part that also wasn't transitioned but that the season starts immediately on is a bunch of people wake up in Mount Weather.
Yes.
Inside Mount Weather.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
there was no setup for that.
Yeah.
Well, they go back and they explain I think, that after they all passed out, because
right.
You basically set off a bomb and you're in a tin can. You lived, but y'all knocked yourself unconscious. And then the mountain men come and take them all away.
Right.
They do explain later,
they
don't
later.
tell you how you got there. I think, personally for me, that this was the best season.
Yeah.
And it had a definitive going place. Like, we knew after episode 1 or 2 what was happening and the essential way where you were going, even though we didn't know how we were going to get there. The world building that took place in season 2 blew my mind. The sets, the getting to see the cities, like the remnants of Washington D.C. and Ton D.C. Like,
I noticed that.
seeing
Yeah, like
the
little
Lincoln
signs.
Memorial and an underground, like a parking garage, and getting to see how after 97 years the Earth had taken over these urban places, and getting to see it was phenomenal. And I think the best thing that the show had done was building the world around them, which we didn't see prior to this, and it was great. And we had one enemy, like, I mean, yeah, sure, the Grounders in general, we had our squabbles between Skaikru and the Grounders, but still the Mountain Men were the big bad, and you knew what we were fighting for. It didn't get so convoluted, and there wasn't a million plots. There was one main plot, and there was a lot of subplots to get there. But we knew where we were going, and that, I thought, was a lot better done.
I agree. I think season 2 has been the best season so far because it's been the tightest, which is basically what you're saying. Season 3 was a tattered web of things that sort of coalesced in the end, maybe. I'm not even sure, and we'll talk about that. But season 2, you're right. You weren't sure, you may not have been sure where it was going at first, especially because Now we'll start to introduce some of these plot points. So when we're first introduced to Mount Weather, the mountain men, as it turns out, are very erudite and normal and have preserved much of the culture of Earth.
I know, like all of these paintings.
How normal can you be, though, if you have literally the treasures of the entire nation?
How did they get
normal to the viewer? Normal in quotes. But they're people that theoretically the viewer, the people of now would relate to, because they're still eating the food we eat and appreciating the culture we appreciate. But as it turns out, they're kind of sci-fi versions of vampires, and they are sucking the blood via medical instruments, but they're sucking the blood out of first the Grounders and then Skaikru when they figure out that their blood protects them from the radiation. So when you're first introduced to all of that, you don't know where everything is going. It's a complete mystery. And then it drives forward and starts to spread out. You get the camps, you get Skaikru, you also get the Grounders' main Tandisi, as we call it back then, and it just starts to dovetail.
I think what I liked about, contradicting what I said earlier about sci-fi.
Oh, hooray! Did we convince you?
A little bit. Well, season 2 did, because they started, like, with the whole blood thing. They did kind of explain that, like, how they hadn't been exposed to the radiation because they've been locked away in this mountain for a century, and then you have these kids who have been in space, which that makes total sense because they're by the sun and science, like, it happened. And so I liked that a lot.
She just made me think of a point for season 1. How do all these kids grow up in space who have been living in a false gravity place? We have astronauts who can't walk after being in space for 3 months.
Years in the future.
I'm sorry. I was just...
they have anti-gravity controls. They have atmosphere things that happen.
That might be a fair point. It just blew my mind in 2.5 seconds.
That is
Thank
very
you.
true, but they should have had more of an effective initially coming back down to...
I'm like, I'm so heavy.
Yeah.
They're all crawling.
Learning how to walk. That was a very good... And seeing that was one of, I think, the creepiest moments. Like, and I mean, the Reapers... Which I have to, every time I say the Reaper, I'm like 2.5 seconds from saying Reaver. I'm like, I just turned into Firefly. They're exactly the same. Exactly.
So as another derivative point, which to me is another strike, but continue.
But seeing them seeing the Grounders caged and them
really
hanging when they're taking the blood is one of the, I think, most haunting things of season 2. And I mean, season 2 has its fair bit of really bad things that go on, but knowing that normal people, quote unquote us, using fellow human beings against their will to our own means is just bone chilling.
Did they ever... Here's a pun for you. Speaking of bone chilling, did they ever explain why everyone had to be conscious while they were drilling for their bone marrow?
Because I think they were just mean. They didn't care.
Well, no, I mean, you'd think 100 years in the future science would have changed, but now, currently, you have to be conscious when they take the bone marrow.
What, like, don't they numb you or something?
I'm not sure.
Maybe
I've never given it.
Right, some kind of, like a spinal block, or...
That happens in another show. She gets drilled, but she's awake the whole time.
Yeah, Catherine Hegel during Grey's Anatomy. You're right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. I mean, I understand having to be awake because of whatever, but...
yeah, Harper's, like, screaming.
It was just so strange to me.
Is Harper earlier in the season, or is that at the end when they're just drilling everybody?
I don't remember Harper until season 3, so don't ask me.
Sorry.
I think we don't discover her until she's having her blood.
No, she wasn't earlier, because I listened to a podcast, another one, where she was talking in an interview, and she had almost died several times in season 1.
She did.
I don't recall this.
I don't remember.
That's what I say.
Did all those things get cut?
They did, because she's still alive.
Yeah.
I don't remember Harper at all in season 1. I remember her in season 2.
Yeah, like I said, I think that's when she gained her sort of significance, because it was Jasper and Monty and that sort of thing trying to save her, because she was like one of the few left.
Where were you going with that?
That was me.
Some thoughts.
Where were you going with that?
I just thought that. Well, I was piggybacking on sort of the bone chillingness. The cruelty of the people in Mount Weather, and how even though they were doing this to other human beings, it almost didn't seem like they regarded them as human beings.
Mm-hmm. And I think that has even a historical perspective of going back to Native Americans being here and then the Pilgrims coming over and then just slaughtering all of them. I think it's just a view of they're savages, they live like this, they live differently from we do, and so suddenly they're bad people.
Yeah, but it's a weird opposite, because Mount Weather people were there before.
Yeah.
Skaikru, at least. I don't know about the Grounders.
But
I can't remember that.
I think the Mount Weather people and the Grounders were there from the same time.
Right,
the Mount Weather people
it's
are the ones that got into the shelter,
right.
and the Grounders are the ones that were left.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting that the people who are originating there at least
no, I totally
are the
agree.
ones killing. Usually in history it's the other way around.
Well,
somebody comes in and they take over.
Mountain men, yes, but Skaikru comes in and is we own the earth. Which, could go on a whole rant about how rude it is to think I landed here, therefore I own it. Mm-hmm. You're in space!
It's history.
I know, right? the historical, and I think that's another very interesting thing that comes up in this season in particular, is the amount of parallels that are handled, I think, a lot better in season 2 to current day situations, historical situations, a lot of the viewing the Grounders as, not viewing them, but treating them the same way that we whites did when we came over, treated Native Americans, and the parallels between that and just treating of other cultures in general. And I lost my train of thought. There was more. But they also did, I think, a very good job in that aspect of just drawing parallels that weren't necessarily always so obvious, but were very strongly in there.
I agree. And one of the ways I think that's hit home is in the character of Cain, because one of the things that they set up is that, Cain feeling guilt over the fact that he sort of advocated those cullings and it led to deaths of people because they were trying to preserve air on the ark, was that he sort of led the peace talks, if you will, with the Grounders and eventually with Lexa, and it had kind of a Indians, Pilgrims sort of parallel in that. Mm-hmm. And that also gives us a little bit of a peek into the adult characters, because at this time the adult characters, Clark, and she escapes Mount Weather, so we should mention that she starts the season inside Mount Weather with the rest of them. Mm-hmm. And the president in Mount Weather very quickly recognizes her as the leader, quote unquote. But because she's immediately suspicious and figures out that things are not quite right there, she manages to escape and tries to go and find the adults to convince them to help her break out everyone else from Mount Weather, which then in turn, because the Grounders are fighting the adults, she's like, well, now I gotta help them make peace so that everybody will go fight Mount Weather, because Mount Weather's bad for all of us. And that was basically the sum total of the plot. So we got a glimpse of where the adult characters were too. And of course with Jaha dead, there was a whole back and forth over who would be Chancellor on the ground between Cain and Abby.
And even Clark, too.
And Clark. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Once she shows up.
When she shows up. She's not there very long.
Yeah, that was actually something I liked a lot, was how she was... Because, and it bothered me almost, because I was like, she's been holding the fort while you guys are, up in space, having a good time. Not a good time. But, you guys are fairly safe. Nothing can really get you in space aside from your own selves. So then you have, these adults who were in power up there come down, and Clark's like, I'm good. I have this all set up. You guys can go hang out wherever you need to go. And so I liked, again, another power battle between her and her mom and Cain and that sort of thing. But I think also Cain almost accepts that she's the leader a lot faster than her mom does, because there's a lot of maternal, I need to protect you kind of thing. And she proves she doesn't really need protecting because she's been there.
Another thing in this season that gets repetitive and annoying for me, though, is the fact that every time Clark seems to finally, start inching her way to fixing something or to being like, hey guys, I know things are bad, but there might be a glimmer of hope, it seems like the adults somehow screw it up. Her and Anya escape, and they're going to try and get the coalition started between the Grounders and the Skaikru, and what do the adults have to do? shoot Anya.
Which made me so
God,
sad.
I loved Anya. Her character was so great.
Clearly she went on to other projects, so maybe that correlated into it, but it was just kind of unnecessary because she was a good character.
Well, but her alliance with Clark was very tenable.
I mean, I know, but they had finally gotten a respect of each other, and they were going to try, which is something that hadn't happened up until then, and would have happened a lot quicker had they not had to go through, 5 more episodes of are we not? Are you going to be able to save Lincoln? A lot of tensions.
I think one of my favorite things about season 2 is Octavia's sort of her becoming a grounder. Essentially, she has
Indra?
Woman. Yes, I love her so much.
Right?
Yeah, her character is crazy, but in a good way, in the sense that she's so powerful and she knows she's like their strategic battle trainer kind of person, and so she learns how to assimilate to that a little bit. But it's also interesting because then you have Clark, who's also kind of becoming a grounder, but in her own way, not willingly either. So I think that parallel is cool.
Well, that happens because the grounders believe that Clark is the leader of Skaikru.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so she's sort of positioned into, I have to do this in order for them to trust me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then, of course, I'm trying to force a segue into
Into
Lexa, and we just keep waiting.
Yeah,
because it's tragic. You don't want to go there.
Not until season 3. We're in season 2 right now.
Yeah, you know what's so funny is...
Well, we have to hit up Finn first.
Oh.
That's true. Well, this overlaps.
That's true.
What's so funny is when I talked about coming back and watching this show, and Selene was like, yeah, Lexa, did you get to that part yet? And I was like, yeah, I did, I think. I don't know. And for me, that in season 2, it wasn't that big of a deal yet. I mean, she was a cool character. It was cool that they were trying to form an alliance, but I did not feel any chemistry between those two characters in season 2.
I'm sorry. Hardcore.
I'm sorry. I will argue that even in season 3, it seemed
I'm straight and
slightly
I know
rushed.
vibes between
I
those
did
two.
not.
It was so strong.
They even kissed in season 2.
Yeah,
I know, and it was not a good kiss.
Because it wasn't well, in all fairness, you're right. It wasn't a good kiss. But
It wasn't a good kiss in season 3 either. There was no tongue. I'm sorry. It was lame.
Okay, this is.
Did you forget the sex scene?
There was not a sex scene. There was a we're naked and I push you on a bed, and then we wake up and we're naked.
It's
This is on the CW,
I know it's
not HBO.
I know,
You asked
If
me
it was on
the sex
HBO,
scene. No,
then
I
they
did
would have
not.
been never mind. We're gonna get into season 3 later.
Yes,
That's
yes.
right.
I'm just saying that my favorite. I am gay, and my favorite relationship on this show was Octavia and Lincoln.
Well,
First of all, Octavia.
they're really
She
that's a
sounds
hardcore. They're real close. I'm holding my fingers this far apart, which makes nothing to you, the listener, but it's a close
I'm
battle.
not saying I didn't like Clark and Lexa, and I liked that they went there with that. It just felt... I just don't like Clark.
Oh, I love Clark.
I think
That's
understand
what it
that.
comes down to. It was not... I just did not believe that Clark really liked Lexa until much, much, much later.
Yeah, I think it was initially just Lexa forming a bond with her because she talks about Kostya, I think, and her relationship with her and her brutal demise. So I think they were just sort of implicating Lexa's initial, because when she shows up, she's very guarded, she doesn't have any emotions, almost like she's a sociopath. But then they're like, "Hey guys, I like Clark." You can feel it.
I guess what I mean when I say there's no chemistry is that it was not a mutual chemistry to me.
That I can agree with.
It was Lexa being interested, and then Clark straight up was like, I don't want anything right now.
Well, I mean, she had because of Finn.
Yeah.
Or should I get over Finn?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Get over it, first of all. And second of all, I was like, you were in 2 other relationships already. What's the third one? I'm like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I don't like Clark.
I think that's what it boils down to.
I think
you're
it
just
is.
Clark.
I've discovered this. I mean, I already kind of knew, but
Yeah.
in my rant, I've discovered.
Which is fair.
I just don't like her. I understand why her character needs to exist for this.
I mean, she's kind of the main.
She's kind of the main character.
She's the lead paid actress in the credits.
I know. It's part of the reason why I probably won't keep watching because I don't like her. Mm-hmm. I feel like she's very.
Her acting is a little forced. I can agree on that, and I think
maybe
that makes her
I don't know. It's like
unlikable.
the character herself, though, is very fickle. Almost to me, like it's one minute I'm pining over Finn, who I don't even understand why you're pining over because that relationship was very quick, and
also very complicated by the fact that he still had feelings for
Raven.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And I get the fact that he thought he'd never see her again, so now he's on the earth and he's like, "Oh look, hot blonde, let's go."
This is true.
Right, but I guess I just don't understand why. I don't understand her interest in him, and then I don't understand her standoffishness with Lexa. I get that she was upset about Finn, but like it didn't. That seemed forced to me.
Yeah,
in a way.
So I'm gonna jump in. First of all, I'm gonna say that I also do not like Clark.
Woot.
I know.
Half off.
She was the jarring character for me for the jump. I could not figure out why she was positioned as this leader person. I get that she's very, like, thoughtful and almost to a fault, actually. She thinks through everything until she can't anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I get that she has sort of a balanced piece, but she also gets put into the position or sets herself up in the position of playing God with some of these situations.
Yeah.
And she's abrasive on top of it. Like, I don't even think she's all that watchable as a person.
Yeah, she doesn't really have that much charisma. Like,
She
Bellamy
doesn't.
has more charisma than
Yes, I enjoy Bellamy.
And
I
I
enjoy
don't
Octavia.
particularly like Bellamy, but
I do agree with the playing God thing because there's that one incident with her and Lexa when the Mountain Men are bombing
And
Washington, D.C.
That a lot of that I think has to do with her overthinking again, but overthinking so much that she allows herself to just follow Lexa's lead.
Lexa's fault
And
a little bit.
I mean, Lexa, it makes sense from Lexa's point of view because as a strategist, like someone who is looking out for all the 13 or 12 clans at this point, all the 12 clans, it makes sense for Lexa.
Yeah.
And Lexa at this point is trying to coach Clark into becoming the leader that she's already positioned herself to be.
Right.
But I think Clark's just so overwhelmed and thinking too much at that point that she doesn't even make her own decision. She just kind of lets herself be led away.
Which brings me to my second point. I'm going to piggyback off you, which in turn piggybacks off of Kelsey, saying she didn't understand Clark with Finn or Clark even with Lexa at first. I think this tendency that Selene is describing very well here also applies to how she approaches her relationships on the show. Because it's Finn who shows interest in Clark first, not the other way around.
I guess that's what I mean. It's like,
Lexa
oh,
who
you
shows
like me?
interest.
I guess I like you then.
Right.
Like, oh, you want to... Yeah.
And this even sort of hedges into the third season and the outpost with what's her name?
Nyla.
Yeah.
I mean, Nyla is the one who's kind of, I guess, flirting, but that's kind of a strong word. She's not really, but there's vibing off her, I guess. And then all of a sudden they're in bed together. So
I think Clark just needed someone's touch at that point. At that
There's
point,
a little
she
bit
was
of that,
just
but-
very...
In all fairness, I think that's very, like, it does sort of point to the fact that she still is kind of like a teen. I don't really know how old. I think they're like 17, 18.
Well, she would have been just... She had one more month
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
she's
before they were put onto Earth.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
she's probably... At this point... So season 1 through 3 happens in like 6 months.
That's true. Yeah, something like that.
So she's barely 18.
Yeah.
Like, she's 18 in
So there's-
some months.
And I think that's still kind of, like I said, I think it points to her still being kind of young and like not really knowing a lot, but being put in this really tough position.
But
to be a leader.
the way that it's written and the way that she acts it comes off as just fickle and indecisive and surprisingly a follower for someone who's set up.
Which is
Leader.
ironic.
Which also, you know, we were talking about earlier, comes into Bellamy as well. For someone who is such a leader at points, he is such a follower.
Well, that's in... Is that season 3?
That's season 3. We'll
Yeah,
talk about
so
that
we
later,
have
I
to-
guess.
it's a little bit in season 2.
Because he
very
follows
end.
very much
At the
Clark.
end.
Yeah.
Because that's
true.
what sets him up. That's what sets up the whole, Mount Weather bombing the Grounders and then the retaliation, and then he thinks that Clark has betrayed everybody else. Mm-hmm. So there's that whole situation.
I was just very glad Finn died.
I agree, because he once he took a gun to a town of innocents, I was just like, dude, you already annoyed me, but really, I get wanting to find someone you love. I do. I get it. There was I don't understand the thought process, I guess. And I once again realized losing your mind in the thought of love and but killing 18 people.
But truthfully, that was the only, his final days or whatever were the only parts of his character that I actually kind of liked. Because even though it was brutal and terrible, he still had some sort of, substance to him. And he didn't have that before, in my personal opinion. He was just kind of there.
What's interesting came from nowhere.
That
was my problem with him.
So
he was all we can't. Let's be peaceful, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Well, let's help kill people," and
I think that
he's the person for the bridge. He's the one that caused all the crap to go on at the bridge,
right?
And the reason the bridge fell apart.
Yeah.
And then now he's killing people, and then he's suddenly very remorseful, and he's like, "I'm going to sacrifice myself."
Yeah.
I don't think the writers did that character a service.
It was just, it was really rushed.
I don't understand why, I guess I understand because she's the main character, but why it was so much hard. Finn's death was so much harder on Clark than it was on Raven.
No, it wasn't. I disagree.
In the long run, though.
I disagree.
Yeah,
Why do you feel that way?
Yeah.
Because they were showing Clark being haunted by him over and over again, and it was I just didn't feel like she really did care about him that much. I feel like she didn't like making the choice to kill him because she's a
that's where I think
sensitive
person.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say
that. But
Raven didn't have that. Raven didn't have to make that choice. I think she was still broken up and grieving.
Oh, I believe that. I do. I know that. Mm-hmm. I remember that. I'm just saying.
I think for Clark, it was mostly just the act of it and the actual choice of doing it, as opposed to
and being the person who literally killed him.
Mm-hmm. Right. Amongst many other choices she makes like that.
Yeah.
On top of it. And that
I just wish Raven was the main character. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Lindsay Morgan does an amazing job as Raven. Honestly, I think she's one of
So I guess what I'm saying is maybe what I'm saying is I wish we could have seen more of her mourning of Finn. Yeah. Because I think it would have made me more sympathetic to Finn's death. Because I didn't care about Finn because Clark didn't care about Finn. And that's whose eyes we are basically seeing everything through because she's the main character. I think if we had seen Finn from Raven's point of view more often, maybe we would have liked him more.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And then learning, too, that Finn, the reason why he got in trouble.
Yeah.
He's not even the spacewalker. He's a pretend spacewalker.
Right.
He's such a fake the entire time.
But that's
a poser.
That, made me sympathetic to him, though. I think
Agreed.
that was another one of the very few moments of,
their last-minute ditches to make us care.
Exactly, that's what it was.
I never hated this character, I guess, as much as you guys did. But at the same time, I was not convinced by Clark and Finn as a unit. The only relationship on the show that I feel any connection to at all is Octavia and Lincoln. And I just think that came from a very organic place, and unfortunately ended in one, which we'll get to in a minute. But I just feel like they were more real in where they started, I guess, whereas the other ones were all forced situations.
Yeah.
And including Clark's too, Finn, and that's why, and we'll get to that in season 3. I'm a shipper for a different pair, but we'll get to that in a second. So, I just want to make sure that you're surprisingly not talking about Lexa enough.
Okay, so
send gifts out and all this stuff about Lexa, and I'm what the hell's going on? And you're not talking about it.
I think we'll wait until 3 when
don't you guys set up before?
So a lot of Lexa that, unlike you, I shipped them from the beginning. I was once again I knew
lesbians when you went.
Right. Well, you're not wrong. You're not. But from just the second we actually see Lexa start to be human and not just Theta, I'm not even sure exactly what episode it is, but I believe it's the gorilla episode, the Pawnee.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember what they call it.
I remember.
The gorilla episode. And we actually get to see them, like, talking not just about war, but about Kostya and her ex-love and how that hurt her, and relating to being like, I'm sorry that you had to kill Finn. You didn't. My people could have done it, but I understand the sacrifice and having to work with an enemy after they killed someone you love. And they gain that mutual respect of each other, and I think it's the play back and forth of we see that Lexa is beginning to have feelings. Clark doesn't, and that's fine. Clark needs time to grieve. Whether she loved Finn or not, you still had to kill someone that you knew and that you slept with, and as much as I'd like to kill some past lovers, it would still kind of suck.
I think she cared about him.
I know she did. She did. I don't think she loved him by any means, but she cared about him.
Right.
And there was an obvious relationship there, and having to move past the rock. She was in between a rock and a hard place, and she chose what she did, and having to deal with Lexa, who is quote unquote the person who made her do it. That is a very tough place to be, but you still get to see the beginnings of respect.
I guess I just saw it as respect and friendship, and the beginnings of a apprenticeship almost. You know what I mean? And
That's very
Lexa
true.
trying to pull out of Clark the leader that she had inside her. But I didn't ever interpret that, at least that early on, as chemistry on either part, in that episode in particular.
I see the chemistry in all too. Every time there's two females in a scene together, I'm like, oh, chemistry.
See, so and that all goes back to our first initial thing, where it was like, how come when there's a boy and a girl, they have to fall in love?
I didn't say they had to fall in love. I just say I see the chemistry between them immediately. Whether it's good chemistry or bad chemistry, I'm always gauging chemistry.
I detected vibes from
Gay.
Lexa very first.
I did as well. She was just...
But I'm slightly
I didn't get it
oblivious,
from
so-
Clark. I didn't.
No.
The Clark transition to I'm learning from this person to I love this person was very awkward.
I thought
And
so.
didn't happen until 3.
Right.
Yeah, and
There
even
was
when
no-
it did, it felt...
And I think this
I
all
don't
kind
know,
of
it
goes
felt
back
strange.
to Jason Rothenberg, the like writer-producer. He's just not great. I dislike him so much.
Wow.
Well, just the things
She had a strong opinion.
I did. I still do. Just the things he said about like a lot of the times, especially at cons and that sort of thing, he's always baited his fans into watching the show, which a lot of people do, but it's annoying when you're actually watching it as an audience member because you're waiting for something to happen and anticipating it to be wonderful, and then it's just kind of rushed because now they have to give you what they promised you. And he's like made some comments to, I think, Eliza Taylor too about her weight and that kind of thing. I just don't like him.
What?
He wanted
This
her.
has happened?
Yeah, he wanted her to lose weight. for her
I'm not
role.
on Tumblr. I'm old.
I don't even remember
I'm
where I
the
saw
grandma
that.
of Tumblr.
I'm pretty sure I saw that
If
on
she's the
Twitter.
grandma, that would probably make me the great grandma if I got one. So
Yeah, he like demanded for her to lose weight for her role, which I guess whatever, because they're like survivalists, whatever. But it was just dumb. Like generally, a lot of things he's done have been similar to that, and I don't like him.
He's not even just to her. He's done a lot cast wise.
Yeah, it's just
He and Ricky Whittle, who plays Lincoln, they had some beefs as well.
is
And
that why Lincoln is?
probably
Shonda
not, but I mean,
she's killed off characters when she's not liked the actual actor.
well, Lindsay Morgan's still on there, and she's gotten into trouble with PR because she's talked about him as well. So not everybody.
Wow.
He's just
Not
I didn't
everyone's
realize
dead.
there was such scandal going on.
Oh
on this
yeah,
show,
but
which may also explain some of the messiness of it.
I think so, and that's what I'm saying. I think a lot of the reason why some things are rushed or awkward are because he does things and then he has to follow through with them because his writing team's like, you gotta like pull through, man. So Lexa, for for some reason she intrigued me. Even though we already had it with Clark, she was younger, she was like a teenager as well, and she's leading this whole clan thing. And I thought that was really interesting.
Lexa's not younger than Clark. Yeah, she's like 21.
Well,
she's still young.
Yeah,
she's still a young leader for sure.
Yeah, like a young, and compared to some of the people we see as grounders, she sort of took for her to take that stance against like.
And it seems to be a set part of their culture that they ascend a younger person
exactly,
to be their commander.
which I think is really intriguing. So, yeah.
Well, I think in all fairness, it's not necessarily that they choose to ascend a younger leader. I think given this is more season 3 as well, but given the brutality prior to Lexa's coalition, it was all of the clans fighting each other. And even though you had Nightbloods from all of the different clans, you had your one Hedda and then all the clans were fighting. And I think it was just because it was such a brutal nature, they died so young that they didn't have time to grow up.
Okay.
I don't think anyone had a chance to get old in order to...
And I think, too, that's probably why Lexa's so brutal, I suppose, as well, is because she's seen all these bad things happen, and she says, hey, I have to keep this in order somehow. And so she makes those hard choices, like leaving
You mean
the
her
mountain.
betrayal?
And, like, leaving the mountain men to bomb the place and
Kondisi.
that sort of thing. Mm-hmm.
And not warn anybody?
Yeah, exactly. Like, just immoral choices, but choices she feels she has to make because of what she's experienced in the past.
That's a good segue.
Segue!
Before I do that segue, does anybody have any other reaction about season 2 prior to its ending point?
I didn't hate Lexa for betraying them. I think the logic behind it was sound. Like, as a strategist person, like, if you're going to get all your people out and they promise to leave you alone, yeah, that's what you're going to do. Because these are people who have, there's a chance you might win, but it wasn't even a guaranteed chance. If you're given an ultimate out as a leader, that's the best choice for your people. And the thing is, Lexa throughout this entire time has been, I think, a prime leader. Like, all of her decisions, she's not finicky or like Clark or any of the Skaikru. Every decision she makes is for the good of the people, and you can see it. Whether or not you agree with the way they go about it, it's all been for the survival of the Grounders, and she formed this coalition. She went against everything in her nature to do what was best for all 12 clans. So she is a strong leader, which we don't have anywhere else in this show at this point. Like, everyone else is...
having their own...
They're all... I mean, then we get Jaha, who we thought was dead and comes back and is now searching for the City of Light. Like, this man is chasing...
through a desert.
Yeah, and he's religious in a way that we're all just like, you heard one story, dude. Why? One story!
I'm going to talk about this, because this also sets up season 3. I don't understand what choice... I mean, unless they were just trying to get Isaiah Washington away from the main action because he's unpopular. Like, why the hell? Yeah, I did not believe that at all. Like, all of a sudden, I'm going to go find the City of Light. And I'm going to take my good pal Murphy.
He took anyone who would go with him.
I know, but of all the people, Murphy. Who everybody acknowledges is kind of a winker.
I feel like they had, again, in the same way with Jaha, I feel like they had to move Murphy away from the action only because he would cause too much conflict at, like, everything that's happening with the Grounders and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like they had to write their way out of it.
But that's kind of like, I don't know, that's like when you're in a play and your director's like, this is your blocking, and then you have to find your motivation. Like, I don't feel like he had...
Yes.
motivation to go with Josh.
I had zero motivation other than everybody hates me and I hate everybody.
And I think
I mean, as you know, someone I'm not. I think for a person who might hate everybody, sure, going out in the desert's a great plan. I mean, if you hate people, you hate people. You're not going to want to stick around with a whole bunch of them who hate you in return.
He doesn't strike me as the type of person, though, who would want to align himself with somebody who is following a religious...
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
That's where I'm at.
Maybe, I guess my best reasoning for him would have been like, I'll leave him when I get bored of him. Maybe I'm just going to go and follow my own way, or I'm going to stay until it's pointless, because even if you hate people, maybe following the smaller group of people, there are less people to annoy you and to hate.
That's fair.
I think him having zero motivation to go was essentially his motivation, because he was just like, okay, I'm out. Like, I don't have a place here or there, so.
Well, and I didn't realize the storyline was going to be so important later on, but I certainly didn't care about it when it was happening.
Right.
And then to piggyback on sort of this talk about Lexa and not hating her for her strategy, I didn't question that either. Like, from a character perspective, I think they've set up Lexa pretty well. They actually, again, the Grounders got more of a foundation more often than any of the Skaikru people. It does inform, going back to what we talked about earlier, like, Clark was so abhorrent about the fact that she made that decision. Like, what then again convinced her to, like, fall in love with her? She's still
I guess
So that's the part that I struggle with.
I guess
Clark,
that's where I struggled as well. It just felt so forced on Clark's side.
Yes.
And maybe too, some of it is, again, like a weird bias or expectations or something. Just because, like, I had then been on Tumblr and seen people, like, shipping this relationship and the fan art and stuff that had come from it, and I was expecting this, like, epic love, and I don't feel like it fulfilled my expectations, I guess, after the way it had been talked up to me.
That's
I know,
my fault.
I'm sorry.
I talked it up so much.
You did.
I am guilty as charged.
But on the bright side, we got to see more of Jasper and Monty, which I liked because I liked
Oh,
him.
yeah.
We should
Sorry,
mention...
backing off of that. I loved Jasper's role, or his change. Like, we got to see him in season 1 as the druggie who just wanted to have fun and then crushed on Octavia and then got speared and
awkward.
survived, but whatever. But to see him go from being that gangly goofball to being someone who was actually becoming a leader, and and to see him fall for Maya, like, Maya and Jasper loved them, and I mean, we'll talk about him again in season 3, but his character arc in season 2 was phenomenal, and once again, like, the character arcs were really good, I thought, for him and Monty and Raven, who we didn't even talk about the fact that she got seriously injured in season 1. Yeah, and, like, she can't walk, she has to deal with all of that, and the fact that she's still pushing through and being the badass she always is.
Very strong character.
Immensely strong. Far stronger than I think. I mean, the only one I could even compare her to, if Skaikru-wise, is Octavia. They both kick ass and take names, and I love them so dearly.
Which is so funny, because the fickle person is the leader, but these two characters, which are so strong and...
Which often happens.
They're kind of pushed to the side.
Politics. See, I think it's Raven and Lexa. Let's make that happen.
There's a ship. That's a ship.
See? That one I can get behind. I mean, they don't have any chemistry because they're never in scenes together, but...
Well, I mean, Raven almost kills her.
Oh, that's true. So basically,
well, not almost.
Because there's the angle.
She tries.
I feel like that would be really hard to get over.
This would have to be
her.
a fantasy ship.
I know.
Well, I mean,
never happen now.
No.
Well, now, not
now.
Talking about. It's time. Things happen, which we're going to get to. So, we're mentioning Maya, and that's good, because that will set up Jasper in season 3. Mm-hmm. Maya is one of the Mount Weather people, and they do fall in love, and she kind of sides with them, because as they all gradually realize, the president and his son and all the Mount Weather
the president's not bad. He's not bad. It's just his son and that crazy doctor lady.
I think that's true. Cage. They're the ones that are kind of doing it with abandon, but they wouldn't have got there without sort of.
They went behind his back.
I know, but the idea of everything and how it was all set up came from him.
Yeah,
I mean, you're right. Initially, the Grounders, I guess. Yeah.
Her mom. I think that was what her main motivation was, and she mentions this. Is her mom was like vehemently against them taking the blood from the Grounders, and so her dad comes in and like helps her get them out and that sort of thing.
They were kind of like a resistance.
Yeah,
that was. I really enjoyed that entire part. Also, in the entire Mount Weather scene, is the fact that there were people who did not agree with it and who took the blood transfusions only when they were forced to, and I thought that was a very interesting thing that they had to force some of their own people to survive.
Yeah.
Eventually, there's a bombing that happens and it kills all the grounders, but then there's retaliation against Mount Weather, which is partially orchestrated from the inside because Bellamy's caught up there and Monty's still there and Jasper is there. And Clark eventually reconnects with them and Raven is reconnecting with them, and there's this whole situation where ultimately Mount Weather is destroyed and Maya dies in that destruction, which is important. In the meantime, the City of Light that Jaha searches for, he more or less finds. But at the end of the season, what we see is Murphy in this weird tower with a bunch of liquor and a TV, and Jaha in a mansion with a woman in a red dress, who we later learn is named Allie. Only those, not to be confused with our Allie sitting in this room, it's spelled with one L.
She's also not in a red dress.
She's not in a red dress, and as far as I know, not an artificial intelligence, a real one.
Yeah, thanks.
No problem. So as we open up on season 3, now fortunately season 3 avoids what happened at the start of season 2. It just opens up from the moment we left season 2. Murphy is in this tower. He doesn't know where he is until he finds Jaha, and Jaha says, I found the City of Light.
3 months later.
3 months
mind
later.
you.
Yes.
He's in there for 3 months. I couldn't imagine being stuck in one room for 3 months.
Yeah, well, he was ready to, off
Yeah,
himself.
he was.
He was going a little crazy.
Yeah, a little stir crazy.
And a mental breakdown. Yeah.
Watching the same, kind of the degradation of other people who have been in the same situation on the TV monitor. So he sees it happening, he feels it happening to himself.
I definitely think that's an internal, it's a psychosomatic thing, because then you start to feel crazy and then you have your, mental breakdown, so.
Exactly. But eventually he does reconnect with Jaha, and Jaha informs him that he found the City of Light. But the City of Light, as it turns out, is this artificial intelligence named Allie that feels the need to proliferate itself through chips that people actually put in their mouth.
How Catholic.
I know.
That's so true, though.
It is a little like communion, isn't it? And then those chips are actually tiny little versions of this program that affix themselves at the base of the brain. We also find out that there is another version of this program, an earlier version of this or maybe it's the later one.
It's the later one.
I guess
ALIE 2.0, essentially.
ALIE 2.0, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what essentially makes the commander of the Grounders. Because the first commander of the Grounders was the woman who fashioned herself to be Allie.
Inception.
There's a little inception going on. There's more to it than that. And I'm sure Selene can explain it better than I.
I was just going to say that Becca didn't fashion Allie after herself. Her boyfriend fashioned Allie after herself.
Oh, okay.
But
some of that stuff got a little... This is a very complex and convoluted season, and I watched it in a relatively short space of time. It all kind of mashes together.
The same thing happened to me.
Yeah, it's like brain bleed. Season 2 had very marked events, and I can remember all the things. But season 3 is and I watched that more recently.
I mean, and I remember listening when I watched this, because I watched it episode by episode up until I was in a show at the time, so up until the episode before Alexa's death, I had watched them all every day.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry, yeah. Spoilers. I'd watch them the day they came out, and then I was in a show, so I couldn't. And I didn't actually see Lexa's death until a week after it had aired.
People rioted, man.
I refused to go on Tumblr.
Rioted where?
On Tumblr.
On Tumblr. Oh my! Well,
This is not known land.
did you know that I say we.
We.
In the Tumblr nation.
Yes.
Tumblr, Lexa
the
crew.
leader of Tumblr.
The Lexa crew.
I know.
Okay. Are you the commander of Tumblr?
No, I am not the Tumblr hitter. We put billboards out on Lexa Deserves Better. Lexa Deserves Better became a trend.
Yeah, number 1 worldwide, I think, at one point.
There's a book that was made for it, Lexa fan art. There's an actual book you can go buy that all the proceeds go to the Trevor.
So Allie has a rant that she has brought up on the Vampire Diaries podcast and the Supernatural podcast. Would you like to say
do it. It's my favorite.
It's not my favorite because it's awful.
I know, it's so awful. Every show I have ever watched, every movie I have ever watched, anything ever on TV does such a disservice to the LGBTQ plus community. Specifically with this show, because Lexa in particular meant so much to so many people. People were having actual emotional breakdowns because of Lexa's death, because she was something to them, and she was representative to who they were, and I think it was a poor choice, and it was unnecessary. And same goes for the Vampire Diaries, like you said, same goes for Supernatural. Literally everything. It's just it always happens, and it
always happens
to like LGBTQ plus people,
and particularly
characters.
Females, wasn't that?
Yes, especially females. Yeah, and it doesn't make sense.
Woman, I could rant with you for days.
So
It's terrible. We lost, I think, 26 lesbians on TV within, 4 months? We lost over 36%. I'm making up. I once had all of this memorized, and I would give this rant to everybody.
87% of statistics are made up on the spot.
I mean, if I could, I would go and I'd find all my statistics right now for you, but I didn't prep because I was trying not to rant.
It's
but
all good. No.
we lost over 30% of our representation on TV. And I speak of this as in lesbians or women loving women on television. Mm-hmm. We lost over 30% of them.
That's important to note because the producers actually said that Clark is bisexual. So,
yes.
Yeah.
But we've lost so many of them this year alone. It's just ridiculous.
Well, the fact that I brought it up on 2 other podcasts at this point, and now this one is unfortunate. Like, clearly there's a trend, and which that's just a social rant. But there's so much to say about Lexa because it did impact so many people, and that's why I think people on Tumblr, people were putting posters up, like you said, billboards, books, everything, and. The writers,
she's more high profile than some of the other characters, though. Like,
exactly.
She's one of the most high profile, also one of the strongest women, and not even just like a lesbian woman, but incredibly strong female character who died by a bullet not meant for her.
Yeah, a straight bullet.
The bury your gay trope hits again in the fact that this happened 10 years ago on Buffy. Another stray bullet. It happens in The Walking Dead where a stray arrow takes out a how many unintentional lesbian deaths do we have to go through?
Yeah, and it's clearly specifically for them. And Jason Rothenberg didn't care. I don't think he really released a statement about it that I was attuned to anyway. He might have said something, but...
He did
but it was
walk around and kind of gave a... Yeah. Oh, he released an open letter, weeks afterwards.
Well, that's
that did a blanket apology that really more or less just apologized for not kind of apologizing.
Exactly. And that's sort of his, brand, but...
Yeah. I mean, okay, I knew ahead of time that Lexa died because I obviously waited too long to watch season 3. And but when they got to in the earlier episodes of season 3 when she was fighting Rowan, I was like, this actually would be an epic place for her to die. If she's gonna die, do it now. This makes sense. And I actually that whole episode.
Rowan is the prince of the Ice Nation.
Yes, he's king now.
And king
now.
He's king. King now. He wasn't in the episode.
Sorry.
Because she threw the thing at the queen after he got beat.
Which was pretty badass.
Which was Mary Alice on Desperate Housewives. Just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, there should have been a significance to it. And I think that's where...
It was a senselessness to it that we were robbed of.
It's that same thing. It's... Especially because they were grounders and... The whole thing is the honor is to die in battle. And so, I mean, maybe not for them necessarily, but there's so many cultures like that where that's the case. And I feel like that was an implied case. That's why Indra says you should have let me die on the field.
Yeah.
That's
true.
Exactly,
so if she had died, if they had to kill her off, if she had died in battle,
it would have made more sense.
It would have made more sense. But...
And, I mean, even if she had to have died where she did, if she had to die by Titus's hand in that room, at least have let her done it on purpose. Have her step in front of Clark.
Yeah.
Have her, been no, don't do this, Titus. Maybe not even necessarily defending Clark, but trying to stop it. But to have her open a door and just be what? There's a bullet in my stomach.
Exactly.
Also, by the way, Clark has saved how many people from bullet wounds to the stomach? Like, that wasn't even a good shot.
I know.
That a stomach wound takes 20 minutes to kill a person. She died within, 30 seconds.
The facts.
There is no way Clark couldn't have saved her, or at least done more to save her, and it would have taken her far longer to die.
I think they just wanted a shock value, because...
That's exactly what it was. Shock value.
They wanted
But it's
it to
always
trend.
shock value.
Exactly. And
But is it shock value when you kill someone every episode?
No, but I'm saying when it comes to LGBTQ plus deaths, it's always for shock value.
Yeah.
That's why they do it. The same stupid thing happened on Supernatural.
Charlie in the
Charlie.
bathtub.
With
What the heck? I still get angry about that one, but
Which I'm personally more upset about.
yeah, because that again
that
was
was,
unnecessary. There's just no
Stupid.
remedy.
It was so
100%.
stupid.
Yeah.
After everything that character had been through. So stupid.
Well, same with Lexa. Everything she's gone through. How many times has she almost died? How many times does she have to break an arm fighting a gorilla?
And
There are so many other times she could have died. Also, bringing off of that, if this Flamekeeper is so important to the Hedda, where the hell was he in season 2?
Very good
question.
She should have died not should have, but she could have died at every turning point out in the field, and yet where is the stupid Flamekeeper who's supposed to be protecting this chip? Nowhere to be seen.
Well, and that actually brings up I think, the key point. The Lexa death, which I don't remember which comes first. I think it's Lexa then Lincoln, right?
Lexa then
Yes.
Lincoln.
Yes, that's
I mean,
I did
come
not.
on. Come on.
Yeah,
Where did that come from? Just
your two
What's-
biggest relationships
Gone.
tanked.
are you trying to alienate your viewers? I mean, I get wanting to be unpredictable and maybe shake up what you've got, but you're on a show that kind of does that as its primary way of being. So why would you do that? That was my thing. Wow, you just delivered a 1-2 punch on the two most central relationships of the show.
Most of your viewers come from those two relationships.
A lot of people, like you said, they stopped watching after they died because it's just...
I personally think the show is on the bubble at this point.
Yeah.
I can't believe it got a season 4. I think it got a season 4 just to prove to the fans that you can't sink. Just because you're this upset doesn't mean you can sink our show. I really honestly think it's a statement trying to tell fans that you can do all you want in terms of petitioning, but we're still going to keep our show.
Yeah. Which I think
Until the ratings sink and the season.
The ratings are already sunk. Their ratings are worse than they were for season 1.
I honestly think the death knell is nigh, but no matter, even if they are trying to do a we're going to stick it to you kind of a thing, I don't think they're long for the world.
I mean, gratefully, Lexa's actress went on to do Fear the Walking
Which
Dead.
is what he tried to pin it on. He tried saying, well, she had another show.
She
but
went to that afterwards.
back to your queer baiting, he released, knowing that she was only going to be in so many episodes, said, hey, look, fans, we're filming the final scene, the final episode today, and Lexa's on thing. Come and actually see us film this episode.
He does that. That's
And he's like, see, we're not going to kill off your lesbian like all those other shows. Legitimately said this shit. In terms of queer baiting, that's where a lot of the fans got really upset. Yes, we were very upset by Lexa's death, but we were even more upset by the way that we were treated by the writing crew, and particularly Jason Rothenberger in general. And fun fact, he lost over 4 million Twitter followers the night he killed Lexa.
Good.
Wow.
I just like him so much.
Same.
He deserves it.
These are all rants that are irrelevant to the actual plot.
I think it all pertains to
Well,
the
I
show,
think
though.
they're, and I think they are relevant in the sense that they may actually be ultimately going to drive what they do with the show next. I mean, I don't want to focus exclusively on the Lexa situation because there were other big things that happened, not the least of which is the virus that was ALIE, and Jaha being sort of ground zero for spreading that, but then Raven is the first one he gets at camp. How do you feel about that?
Oh, that was heartbreaking to me. Because she was such a strong woman. She still is a strong woman. She was a strong woman throughout the show. But, the entire, if we get her, we can convince everyone else. Because they weren't wrong. She is a person who, even more so than the last season, because they drilled through her hip, is having problems just walking. And Abby is I wouldn't say working against her, but Abby has now essentially tabled her from a job, and she has nothing left. Everything she has Her friends, Jasper's going through hell right now.
Because he's very depressed after the death of Maya.
And Mount Weather just happened. Like, Mount Weather 2.0 just happened.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, most of her friends are either gone or injured, and she can't do anything. And, like, to see her fall into a part where she's like, well, what could have hurt to take the ship? And then, you know, she gets better only to realize this is not the better that I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And then all the crap she has to go through afterwards, like...
But it's such a cool character arc because it shows how strong she is. Because Allie specifically says, I've never had anyone fight me back.
Exactly.
After they've taken this. I didn't calculate free will and all of that. And then in the scene where they're trying to use the wristband to get the EMP,
electromagnetic pulse.
Thank you. I was going to say EMF, and I was like, that's wrong. The EMP,
Supernatural.
you know, and I know, too much supernatural. The EMP, and then Allie figures it out, and she's trying to make her kill herself by, like, banging her head against the head.
That was a frightening scene.
Oh
well
my
staged, well staged, well performed.
I was in during that episode. I actively watched that episode because a lot of times I sit here on my phone and play like Candy Crush or something. Even it sucked that she took the chip, but I just thought it was such a cool place to take her character. And then she survived that too.
Mm-hmm. Survived that, and then she's the one that helps bring about the fall. And essentially, like Raven, like as we were talking earlier, Raven and Octavia are some of the strongest characters left now.
Yeah.
And yet they're not the leaders. And you're like, but why not? Obviously, these women are so strong. And
I think they're leaders in their own right, and they kind of work within themselves and then outward a little bit. So, like, they start with their own troubles and then kind of fix everyone around them in a way, whereas Clark just goes, like, full head-on into a problem.
She doesn't take care of herself either. Clark is all about everyone else until she can't handle, and then she ran away. And I don't blame her for running away. 3 months off after everything that she went through during season 2, like, everyone blames her for Mount Weather, and then Bellamy and Monty are both kind of like, well, we pulled it too. Oh, well, Bellamy much more than Monty. Was like, we pulled it too, why'd you have to leave? But she didn't just pull a lever and kill everyone in Mount Weather. She also, whether she made the conscious decision or not, allowed Tondisi to get bombed. She killed Finn. She was essentially, you know, in charge, but not really when the dropship happened, and she has all of that weighing on her, and running away, I can't say I blame her. And I think one of the things that really bothered me in season 3 was the fact that she was constantly apologizing to everybody. Bellamy is always blaming her. He's like, you left me, and this is your fault because you left me.
Yeah. So before you go on, that he tries, because I want to hit on this point too. So while all this stuff is happening over here with the grounders, the other piece that's important and kind of makes the camp, Arcadia, it's now Arcadia, vulnerable to the City of Light, is the fact that the adult leadership is very, very unstable. Mm-hmm. Abby's super autocratic. She's very unpopular as a chancellor. She's very wishy-washy as a chancellor. Plus, she doesn't want it.
Which is
very
like,
I don't want
seems to run in the family.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes.
She doesn't want it, so she's trying to prop Kane up, because Kane basically does want it, because Kane wants to be able to be the conduit of peace to the grounders.
And I think he'd be a good one, too.
I think he would,
He'd have been a great one before all this everything went down.
Well, he was the one, like we spoke on, he kind of brought Lexa into the whole situation, and was like, no, listen to her, she has ways to fix our problems. So yeah, I think he's a peacemaker, but he also makes hard choices at the same time.
I think he's a peacemaker because he's made the hard choices in the past and they've been wrong.
Right. I think that's true.
He's the one character who actually learns from his mistakes.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, bomb dropped.
True.
Bam.
But then, in the meantime, earlier in the season, they discover survivors of Farm Station, because, of course, all the different space stations have crashed by this time, and Farm Station hadn't reunited with them yet. On Farm Station, we meet Monty's mom. Mm-hmm. We also meet Charles Pike. And Farm Station's approach to the Grounders, because they've had nothing but skirmishes with them, is kill all grounders. Just hands down, they don't care. They don't believe grounders are capable of anything but violence toward them, so they have an all violence toward grounders policy. When Farm Station gets brought back into Arcadia, the complex pieces of Lexa sending an army to protect Skaikru, Pike positioning himself to be voted into Chancellor, and then as Chancellor ordering the hit, essentially, on Lexa's army, and it's a peacekeeping army. It's not a hostile army. Indra is, of course, part of that army. Selene leaves her alive because of her relationship to Octavia. So, I think it's important to mention all of that. What did you think about that?
What bewilders me is how, if the Grounders knew about the farm station, like another space station that was there with other survivors, I don't know why they wouldn't think to mention that to the Ark. That's just mechanics, I guess.
Because I believe they fell in Ice Nation.
Oh,
and
that's
they
true.
were in Asgetta territory, therefore they were very much... I mean, Asgetta does what besides hate everyone else?
Yeah,
So.
That's true. Ice Nation is like anti-everybody but Ice Nation.
Yeah.
Which sucks because they're technically kind of in our...
Ice Nation.
They're in our area.
That's true.
They're like, this is Sparta.
They are this is Sparta.
I know.
You're right.
So
I'm
that's...
just here to drop truth bombs.
Right.
So in that term, like in terms of that's why we don't know Farm Station prior to now.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Outside of that, Pike is trouble. I can't. That is what is so frustrating for me in all of this. Is it's all so
like now.
It's so
timely.
No, it's so scary because look at the shit that Pike did in this show. Like things were starting to get good, and he just had to go and just screw everything up so bad. Like not even just like I made a mistake. He just like I'm gonna
massacre 300 people.
I mean, yeah, sure. That.
For example.
I mean, that's my first action. It's my first. Yeah, I'm gonna release all of us. Also, the mechanics of killing all 300 of them without them getting a single wound. Don't even get me started. I don't care if you did it while they were
10
asleep.
people with machine guns.
10 people with machine guns is not going to kill 300 without wounding a single one. It's just not.
It's not a single one of the 10.
Yes.
Yes.
It's just not probable at all.
The science.
I think also just Bellamy. I do not understand. I don't understand how Bellamy went from the Bellamy of season 2, who I really thoroughly loved as a character. I think he went through such a great arc, and he truly became a man that I could have thought as a leader. Like he was becoming the leader that they needed. And suddenly, I get that he lost Gina, whom he didn't actually seem to be bothered by when he lost. Can we just say
when she was alive?
Or
really.
yeah,
I didn't even know they were a thing except for one episode.
I mean, that's
why
the
do you
thing,
care so much?
and he didn't seem to care so much. That's what bothered me about it.
I
And
thought she was just sex, basically.
Again, forcing relationships on the show.
Yeah.
because all he was like, Clark, I'm gonna go hide and get Clark, which I get. Maybe he has this huge boner for Clark.
I actually do. Now that brings me to my shipping thing.
I know you're a Balark, aren't you?
I am because they're the only time they're the only pair in which Clark is involved that I've seen legitimate two-way chemistry.
I will say that, yes, and I think that's why initially I was on board with them, is because it was believable, but I also just like Lexa, so.
I think their starting points and their
Which they were initially...
intersections
they were...
are more organically steering towards something.
Well, and I
like
think
that.
the funny thing, I agree with you a little bit, and I think that the chemistry was there, and then they were like, no, we can't do that. That's so predictable. Let's kill people we didn't expect them to kill. Like, I just think they were trying to stay unpredictable, so they never went that way. Even though that actually makes the most sense most of the time, I think.
The writers in
being unpredictable for the sake of being unpredictable is annoying.
And that's what
I think that's what happened. That's why the show fell apart after season 2.
Annoying.
Season 3
being
was
unpredictable for the sake of being unpredictable.
Yeah.
it was a hot mess.
Yeah.
I think the pacing was all off. Like, I mean, I can
You're absolutely
understand.
right about that. Yeah.
I can understand Bellamy going from where he was to following Pike. but not in the amount of time that happened. Not enough stuff happened, and there's no way, there is just absolutely no way that he fell apart in 2 episodes in that way, to the part where he was like, I'm just gonna kill them all. I can understand maybe going with them and not passively shooting, or maybe trying to stop here and there, but he actively believed in what he was doing, and that I can't believe.
He was just he was such a victim of mob mentality, which is so strange because he's always been so good at
That's my
thinking
right there.
He was such a, like, and I mean, there were times where he followed, yes, and like, as we mentioned earlier, we had problems with him being followed, but he was following in a leadership way still.
He was following, he was, like, compromising.
Yes.
You know, like...
That's true. But then to contradict,
Concessions.
in season 1, when they're hanging Murphy, that was a big mob mentality for him as well.
Yeah, that's true.
That was him giving in to the mob while still trying to be a leader. Like, he was still leading.
That's true.
Yeah, he
But
never led with Pike. He just let Pike take the reins.
He didn't believe Murphy should die.
Yeah.
He just didn't know how to keep the mob
He was
happy.
Pontius Pilate.
Yes! He was like, I'm washing my hands of this, you do what you must. Whereas this one...
You're all night, guys.
Tip your waitress.
That's very true, though. That's a good point.
But, and I mean, in like terms of... That's my biggest problem with Bellamy, is I don't believe his fall into dissent.
Which then indirectly set up the execution of Lincoln, because of course there's insurrection. You know, they try to imprison the Grounders, plus Kane, who sympathizes with the Grounders, and of course Octavia's kind of in and out trying to rescue Lincoln because her whole focus is Lincoln. And then Lincoln basically stays behind to give the others a chance to get away, and Pike shoots him in cold blood. While she's watching.
Okay, and can I just say for a second, just backtracking like 2 steps,
Sure.
that he drugs Octavia so that she has to go with him, which is just so heartbreaking in general, like that he loves her that much that he, you know, the whole thing. But then I was like thinking about it while I was watching it, and I was like, God, he's just making it harder for Kane to get out. Now he's got to carry this chick with him. Like, this is not good strategy. That moment when Octavia was watching Lincoln get shot, that was the hardest moment of the show for me. I cried.
Yeah, me too.
And maybe, too, because their relationship had actually spanned pretty much all 3 seasons.
Well, I also think it was very real.
It was.
Chemistry
It was.
between them themselves, as opposed to just the characters. I think they acted that very well.
And their fights within each other were so human. Like, Clark and Lexa's battles were so world break. Like, they were not people's fights. They were leaders' fights and battles on a whole different ground, whereas Lincoln and Octavia's were real people.
Yeah.
And they had, like, even the entire us versus them, where they swapped roles, where she was becoming more Grounder and he was becoming more Skaikru, and then they kind of converged back, and like, everything about it was so give and take and so much more human.
I guess that's what makes it more believable, too, for me.
It's something that we can connect to in a way that is real for everybody.
And really, I mean, Octavia didn't really find herself until she met Lincoln then became part of the Grounder culture.
In all fairness, she was under the floorboard for 16 years.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that she's a functioning human being at all. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I lived under floorboards for 16 years, I'm not even sure that.
I know.
Psychologically,
she is so strong. I mean, once again, going back to strong female characters, it's sad that the strongest female characters are the ones that are just,
I think,
kind of pushed to the sides a bit.
But and then my favorite moment was when she finally was reunited with Bellamy and just punched the shit out of him. And then everyone kept trying to stop, and he was like, no, let her keep doing it. And then she clinched it with, what was it? Was it disown? Was that the word she used? Like, I disown you. And that was what broke him. And that was so, I just thought that was such an interesting directing choice, actually, to let Bellamy be like, no, physical pain, whatever, let her get it out. And then once she said that to him, it really started to sink in. And that was the beginning of what we referred to earlier, what your other podcast referred to
stole it
as breaking Bellamy. which
I see.
that up until the moment when he makes the comment of, I don't remember his exact quote, but about the moment you realize you're a villain, that you're the bad guy, and him having to deal with that became interesting. But I just still don't understand how it was true to his character to get to that place to begin with.
Yeah. And I think for Octavia, in my personal opinion, I mean, aside from Raven, maybe she's progressed the most. Mm-hmm. I think
Octavia's
development
come further than Raven.
Yeah, she's just, I don't know, because when she started off, she was just kind of that annoying,
we're back,
sister.
Bitches! And I was like, you're back? You were never there. But okay.
She jumps into the lake and, whatever, so she's kind of just that rebellious, and I know she has that moment we talked about where Bellamy is, dictating her love life, and then suddenly she has this, massive wave of shock where she's like, wow, this is, the real world, and bad stuff is happening, and I need to assimilate myself to that. Yeah. And like you said, she did that through Lincoln because he was sort of goodness, but one that still showed her to how she can battle against. And I think even he says in season 2, Bellamy thanks him for making her strong, and he says she was already strong. I was just there and helped her with that. So, and I think that's really a true quote to who her character is.
There's this estrangement period, and then of course they make this decision because the chip, the whole City of Light concept, doesn't stay isolated in Arcadia. Mm-mm. It spreads to the Grounders, into the Grounders' capital city, which is called Polis. This is a discovery that Murphy makes, actually, through Titus, the Flamekeeper. They figure out that this is all named after these initial people that actually... The whole thing was created indirectly by the people who caused the apocalypse on Earth to start. The City of Light, as it were, this artificial intelligence construct, spreads, and Clark and Bellamy and Octavia and Jasper, who is, of course, he's a depressed wreck the entire season, just drinking himself into oblivion and cannot deal with life, to the point where even Monty gives up on him for a while. They end up trying to fight everybody else. Mm-hmm. Even Kane and Abby end up being chipped. Mm-hmm. And that's shortly after Kane and Abby have a little thing. A moment
of hope.
Which I have to say, when Jaha puts Kane up on the cross, which the cross is really an X, but he's strung up
he's
there
literally
like
being
the
crucified.
cross. Yeah, he's being crucified was horrific. I was like, wow, they let that happen on network TV?
Okay, so the thing is, this entire show, it's like this season wanted to be CW's version of Game of Thrones.
That's
And what bothers me the most about it is, unlike Game of Thrones, they don't have the plot for the violence.
Right.
I mean, yes, they're in a spot where, anything bad can happen, and bad thing does happen, but, I mean, really? They don't have the plot leading up to most of this violence, and at least the scope of violence that is happening.
That's so true. Game of Thrones was a very complex chessboard laying that led up to, for example, the beheading of Ned Stark in season 1. Mm-hmm. They were very careful, very strategic game setting moments, whereas this was just, there's this chip in this evil computer, and this computer makes humans do this to humans, essentially.
I can't get input because I don't watch Game of Thrones, but
I don't either.
Yeah,
but like you said earlier, it literally became. You said this to me earlier. I should.
Sorry. Yes.
It literally became a city of blood. They were actually walking on ground that was just saturated in blood, and all these people being crucified
or hung, because Abby goes to try to hang herself to convince Clark to take the chip, which is hard.
It's just the scope of violence, and as I said, it's not shock value when you kill someone every other episode, or when you kill someone every episode. And I think back to the pacing, this season had so many evil villains, and most of these villains could have had a season arc themselves. The season started off with the Ice Nation being set up to be the big bad.
Yeah.
and then that's all done by season, what is it, episode 4, Watch the Thrones or something?
Yeah.
Like, you brought in Queen Naya, who could have been an epic evil, and just like, we're done with her. You bring in, there's just so many options. Antari, and I feel,
crazy
Antari was, I think, an amazing character up until she got chipped, and then she just became another pawn. Like,
yeah,
you could
I
have
was
played
starting to
that
like
out.
her a lot,
I mean,
even though she was obviously evil, you know.
but I mean, that's the, you know, there's times where you root for the bad guy because they are such a cool character, and it sucked that you never really got that chance because most of your evil characters were killed off before you get a chance to really do anything. And I mean, I love the AI story. I thought it was a really ingenious and cool plot because I never would have imagined watching season 1 that you'd have ended up with an AI plot. Never.
I agree.
Let alone to have this AI plot take over the entire world, essentially. And I think it was a total waste of a lot of really good ideas, which just got thrown in and played out so quickly. Like, Luna could have been so much bigger, and I think should have been so much bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, and we got the nice little Luna tip right in the middle, right in the beginning. Like, one of the which is also, I think, a really cool throwback to the entire very first Grounder word spoken. And and Octavia finally gets to say it.
So I should mention, to sort of set that up a little bit, and that's where I was going to. Essentially, the remaining 100 sort of reformed together because they were all variously at odds, but Bellamy and Octavia are estranged. And what they decided to do is to go find Luna, because Luna is Lincoln's friend, but she's also a Nightblood. And Clark has the Flame, which is this other AI intelligence. And what we come to find out, thanks to the ALIE that is trying to kill everybody, is that this other ALIE, this upgraded version, is the one that would eventually subdue her, because she's the better program that doesn't have all the moral complications that comes with the first program. And the whole point of the program is to protect humans, but the first version of the program will do that at any cost, whereas the second version of the program makes more informed decisions. Those informed decisions get put in the new commander, a Nightblood, that it affixes itself to. It's very complicated when you start to try to explain it.
It's very lost.
It is very lost-like.
But not as successful.
There's lots of... Do you notice all the derivative comparisons? Anyway,
It's all happening.
I'm just saying.
You can also argue, I was saving this for later because there was a question for later, but you can also argue that it's really derivative of at least the new Battlestar Galactica as well, where there's this AI and they're trying to get to Earth. For a show that seemed very original when I first started watching it,
It's not.
It certainly is very derivative.
Yeah, it's very derivative. So anyway, they're going to go try to find Luna, and they find her on what looks like a leftover oil rig.
Yep.
Essentially, yeah.
And of
I
course,
literally said out loud, is that an oil rig?
which is so random. So is that like in the middle of the Atlantic? It must be. They go out to ocean if they're by
Nobody
Washington,
knows
D.C.
because they have to black out
That's
before
true.
they can go there.
They have to blindfold, and of course,
No, they don't even blindfold them. They make
Oh,
them
yeah, they
drink that
drug
stuff.
potion
They drug
thing.
it. They drug them.
Yeah, truth. So they get there, and of course, Luna doesn't want any. She's turned her back on the whole kit and caboodle. She actually was part of Lexa's conclave, or whatever it's called, coalition, or
Conclave.
okay,
Coalition is the good thing, not
And
the point where you kill everyone.
yeah. And she actually intimates that she could have had it, but didn't want it. She walked away. And when they try to convince her, she's like, no. And then, of course, the chip somehow finds the oil rig. I'm not even sure how that happened. They didn't explain that. And then all of a
You
sudden...
mean how Allie knew they were on the oil rig?
Well, not how they got chipped grounders there.
Oh,
chipped
that too.
grounders,
Yeah.
that too. And then they were back on the mainland because Luna said no. And where's Luna? Luna's, I guess, hanging out there. And then finally, there's this huge climactic battle, which involves chipped versus the very few non-chipped, and Clark accepting the flame. And doing that by being
right?
hooked up to the dying Antari, who has Knight's blood, and being transfused with her blood so she can accept this chip. While the chipped zombie people are climbing the tower to kill the rest and chip them.
I think it got a little far from its initial, like,
You realize that, huh?
Yeah, like, it just, I don't...
We lost the plot.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Wait, there was a plot?
There were 5.
There were 25.
Like, I feel like the writers had such an intention, and then somewhere along the way, someone, like, took some drugs or something. Like, I don't even know. Like, it just got messed up. I don't even know.
But hey, guys, we fixed it with another flipping of the switch.
Which is what happened. So, of course, the whole thing is they have to go into the City of Light to destroy the City of Light. That's the moral. So Clark is going to go pull the kill switch. And in there, of course, she was very protective of the flame because the flame had Lexa's essence. And that's where she meets Lexa again, fleetingly, because, you know, she died again. Essentially, her essence is gone.
Is it, though?
I don't know, because it's very unclear.
Because they still have the chip. I don't know if...
Oh, yeah.
Because the chip is separate than the City of Light.
Well, yeah, but she was fighting all the people that came at her.
And then they ran off. Well, that fight happens elsewhere. And then Clark just keeps going.
Yeah.
So we don't really know.
Okay.
I think Alexa hinted to that in season 2, didn't she? Like, she's talking to Clark, and then she says something about how your, like, spirit or something moves on.
Yeah, her spirit is still in the chip, and I think the chip is separate than the City of Light, but because Clark... I don't really know.
I don't understand how the two intelligences meld, number one. And then essentially, it's... Part of it is Raven guiding her from Arcadia and kind of hacking into the system and showing her the switch. And then Clark meets the creator of ALIE and learns about this, what is essentially a lever for a kill switch. And then also explains, the ALIE program explains to her, well, I'm doing all this because the Earth is facing nuclear annihilation.
Why didn't Allie just say that in the first place?
This is what I'm saying. Because of dying nuclear power plants that still exist on the Earth, apparently, which we've never seen one at all.
And I'm like, did she tell Jaha that and he's just not telling people? Did she not tell
I don't know about you, but if I was given the option to take the chip because the Earth is dying versus you should just take the chip, I'd take it if I knew the world was dying. I'm not going to take it.
Or even take the chip because the world is dying instead of take the chip because it will relieve you of your pain, whatever.
Or I'm going to force you to take the chip by pointing the gun at someone. You know, like, explain. Maybe I'd do it.
I think it makes sense to have history, like, repeat itself almost with, like, the threat of another nuclear apocalypse, but...
I just don't know, like, how now that we've destroyed the City of Light, what is Clark gonna do? Go around and run to every nuclear station and fix it? Because it's not even like it's... She literally has her and Raven.
They're definitely starting to write themselves into a corner, so it'll be interesting to see how that...
Like, these dying nuclear stations aren't just gonna be fixed by turning them off. They're dying because there's no one there keeping them going.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the thought I had, because of course Clark, what they're hinting at is Clark ends up flipping the switch and turning off the City of Light, which rends everybody in dramatic fashion, and all their pain comes back. People fall off the tower, I guess, the ones that were climbing it. Anyway, the point is, it all ends very abruptly. There's sort of this exchange of looks, these few, perfunctory hugs, and then, oh, by the way, Bellamy, the Earth's going to die anyway. I just really felt like, where are we going? This is a mess.
That's the thing.
This is a mess.
Why should I care that the Earth is dying at this point? That's where I'm at.
If they had made it, like you said, if they had said the Earth is dying from the get-go, then maybe they could have moved forward and made the viewer more invested in the survival of them now. Because they came to the Earth to survive, and now, that's essentially the whole plot of the show. You come to the Earth to survive, and then you're being killed off by it. And so, but this is now natural threat, which they have no, power over. Exactly. And so it'll be interesting to see how they write themselves out of that. It'll be another mess, I think, because a lot of shows have done that, where they just try and be dramatic, and then it doesn't work out.
And that's really what I think...
Cough, cough, supernatural.
But what we're hinting at, or more than hinting at, I think what we've actually talked ourselves around into, and the big point of it is they never laid the groundwork for the show.
Exactly.
The grounder work. They never laid the groundwork for the show. They did not give us really compelling reasons to care about most of the characters, except for a few exceptions, notably, Octavia, for example. And then they just keep throwing spaghetti into the pot just to see what might happen, and then come out of it with really burnt pasta that doesn't taste very good.
Well, and I mean, of all of the characters I cared about, almost all of them were grounders. Do we even have a named grounder alive anymore?
That's the
Is the Ice Nation Prince still alive?
Rowan? Okay, so we have Rowan.
There's one.
Is Nyla still alive? Nyla's still alive.
Yeah, she ran away.
So we have Rowan and Nyla.
Yeah.
But, the characters have been there since day one. And like you said, people care more about them than they do the actual, characters you introduced us to. So it doesn't make sense. The writing is, someone needs to just sit down and just wipe the slate clean.
I really
somehow.
thought that there wasn't going to be another season, and I wonder if they thought the same thing when they wrote this one.
That's very surprising to me.
It's extremely unfocused. I mean, there were moments, one of the most heartbreaking moments for me was when Monty's mom gets chipped. And Monty's mom basically comes for the purpose of trying to forcibly chip Monty, and Monty ends up making the decision to shoot her because she's attacking him and attacking, I think
she was going to kill Octavia, I thought she was going to kill Octavia.
Yeah. So he shoots her in self-defense, more or less, and it's a very heartbreaking decision, and re-encounters her for a minute with the whole City of Light interchange. I mean, there are really mature and sophisticated storytelling moments, like you've brought up some of them, Kelsey did earlier, and Selene has been, and Allie, of course, you as well, but in the end, moments do not a great story make.
No.
Because they're not connected.
Exactly. I think this whole, technology thing, it could have been something really great had, like you said, they fixated it on a goal like Season 2. Season 2 had a very direct pathway that they were heading down, but Season 3 just didn't have that.
They just needed to...
a dirt rubble road that, no one could get down. It was a mess.
They just needed to slow down, I think, honestly. A lot of people I know praised it for the fact that it was always so high energy, and I was like, but that was its downfall.
Yeah.
And another thing that really bothered me is that no one ever had time to react to anything.
Which I hate that about shows. Again, a death happens and no one grieves. It just doesn't make sense because it's not realistic. Which I guess if you're in survival situations like that, you kind of always have to be high functioning no matter what the situation is, but still some of those things, some of the things that have happened, it just doesn't.
Well, and this is reality, and ultimately you're trying to tell a story.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, and Selene, I think you keep saying, there's a death every episode, it's not interesting anymore, it just gets repetitive. Or, I mean, I literally did start to disengage. I was starting to slog through Season 3 because it's well, what do I care? They're just going to die. I don't have any stake in this anymore.
Yeah. There are shows that have done that, The Walking Dead, for example. You just sort of assume everyone will die anyway, and to have shock value deaths like that is fine. I know The Walking Dead.
Twists and turns are good for a story.
Well, exactly.
There's no twists and turns here.
Yeah.
It's a straight line of rubble road, like you said. That's a good way to describe it.
I know you haven't watched it, but The Walking Dead had back-to-back episodes where Beth died and then Tyrese died.
Spoilers!
Spoilers!
That's for The Walking Dead podcast!
And that was a big thing. But the thing about The 100 is they can't do that because they don't, they have characters, but to have Lexa, for example, who was so important, and then to have Lincoln, it just doesn't make sense. They just don't do their shock value right, I guess is what I'm getting at.
So where can they go from here? What do you predict from this Season 4, whether you're going to watch it or not?
I think they have to clean up the mess that they made.
How can they do that? What do you suggest? Do you have a suggestion? Or are they so far gone?
I think get away from the technology. I think to have it is good because it is another aspect of that world, but they're just getting too far out from what they originated at. And for me, as a viewer, that's just frustrating because I don't like when shows do that, but some people do, so it's it's a balance of what works best, I guess.
I think if your tech is done right, it's fine.
Exactly.
But
That's
they're
the
not
thing.
using their tech right.
Yeah,
And
it's just-
they're, once again, that was two switches flicked in a row that, quote unquote, saved the day, but killed everyone.
Yeah.
And, like, they're Deus Ex Machinas that just, first off, it's repetitive because you've done it twice now.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, sometimes you want your ending to, I'm not saying I want a predictable ending, but I don't want it to be where I don't even know where it's going anymore. Like, I don't even know where to begin, because once again, now they have an unattainable goal. Like, how do you save the world in 6 months? Like, and even if this is just North America, just North America's power plants are dying. How many how many nuclear plants do we have? We have a lot of them.
Yeah.
You literally have to go and get rid of all of them. And hypothetically, the only way you could do that now is with tech.
And
but
that's just not
do we have enough people with tech in order to fix them all even? Even if we start teaching all of the grounders, which coincidentally we've all killed off or, made hate us. I don't know. I do know that I know they have to travel and meet other grounder nations because they've talked about it on Tumblr, and I've seen pictures of costumes for some of the other groups. Like, I know the Delta. No. Like the Delta crew, essentially, whatever they're called. I can't remember.
Yeah. I can't remember that either. I don't think I've seen that. But yeah.
As I said, I hang out on the British slang dictionary, and every time he comes up with a new cool word, I'm reading them. But like, I know that they're going to have to start traveling and meeting these other grounder clans. But at this point,
Which, that could be a really interesting, because they haven't really explored much, if that makes sense. Like, we've seen different cities and that sort of thing. We've seen the City of Light, like, them go off into the desert, but we just haven't seen anything outside of that. So maybe that would be something that would sort of save the day, is to see other grounder clans in different parts of this world that they've created.
I'm not sure if that's enough to bring me back in. Like, I will watch from Tumblr and
just
see GIFs
GIF the
and
whole show.
posts and listen to people who, are going to tell me about it, but I'm not sure I'm going to go back and watch. Maybe if there's compelling enough reasons, I'll watch a scene here and there. I don't know how you fix this mess.
That's the thing. Like, just the problem that they have now, it's not attainable to fix, like, within the character's reach.
Within the world, even.
Exactly. And so now what's probably going to happen is they're going to have some magical human come down and, like, weirdly save the day. Again, with the switches. That just bothers me because it's unrealistic. But maybe I'm just too nitpicky.
Or maybe they all die.
That would be my happiest ending. At one point, I was like, at this point, I would be okay with them just...
There are a lot of shows
sailing. Like,
maybe they build
if it ends...
and they end in space.
Oh, God.
Full circle.
Oh, wow.
So not worth it.
I would be angry if that, like, full-on rage.
Like, I just want my babies to stop hurting. Like, just stop hurting Raven and Octavia. Just let them be at peace.
Do you have any predictions or words?
I have no idea.
I know,
Okay.
that's the thing.
No.
Just no idea.
I don't have any idea either. I mean, I honestly think that they've sunk themselves into quite a bit of a writing frenzy, and I don't know how interesting it's going to be, even if they are going to go from power plant to power plant to power plant. I mean, that just seems like it's going to be a potentially very boring show.
Yeah.
Even if they fix all the ones in North America, the ones that are overseas are eventually going to blow up, and that's just going to send a cloud this way.
Like, it all causes, again, the science.
And
like,
that actually makes me wonder, are there other people on the earth? Like, we're just in North America.
Yeah.
What about foreign grounders?
Are there Aztec grounders? I really want that to be a thing.
like, people like the mountain men, like, just different, like, species. Almost.
Yeah,
Like,
are there actual
subspecies.
tech living? Not grounders, but are there actual, like,
Yeah.
mountain men type areas in Europe? Would be very...
but
dang
that's
it.
like
I can't
not-
talk myself into wanting to know something else. Dang it. Stop it.
I just feel like Jason Rothenberg isn't smart enough to do something like that, though. So.
Wow! I'm hearing that.
I dislike him. I'm sorry if you're listening.
I dislike him a lot, too. I don't even care if he's listening. I don't like you.
Sorry,
If you
not
are
sorry.
listening, that was Selene.
I don't need to wear sunscreen when I'm hanging out with Allie.
Feel that
She's
burn.
throwing so much shade.
I got that
Wow.
I'm glad you got that.
Yeah, I would think that the opposite route.
So, Selene has already said that she is not going to keep watching. Just a Tumblr watcher. What about you two?
I will only watch it if you bug me to do another podcast.
Well, I mean, you know, as long as it exists, we'll podcast it. You don't have to like it.
Yeah, I know. I'm aware.
Kristen did Daredevil season 1. She hated that.
It's infamous.
I know, it's notorious.
What?
Hi, Kristen, if you're watching. If
you're listening, Kristen, the Marvel's Defenders panel started with Daredevil season 1. Everybody liked it at least, if not loved it outright.
I loved it.
Well, she watched Jessica Jones first and was convinced that was how they all were. And when she started to watch Daredevil, which was very different.
She was highly disappointed.
She was highly disappointed and came into the podcast saying she hated it.
Yeah. And
It was kind of an animal pit, essentially.
A lion's den.
A lion's den! That's what I meant to say, where she was the prey and everybody else was... I was moderating the prey. I wasn't picking on her, but everybody else was.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I've heard about it. Like, that's how famous it is. Yeah, so...
I don't think that'll happen here, though, because I think the reactions have been lukewarm at best.
The general consensus that everyone's
I'm not even going to watch it anymore. I'll watch it if I'm bugged. What about you?
I think I'm like you in the fact that I'm a completionist, so I'll keep watching it for the sake of watching it. And I do still love Octavia and Raven. Like, I have characters, and that's essentially what keeps me watching a show, is the characters. Like, there's plenty of shows that I dislike, cough, The Vampire Diaries, but I'm still watching them because... Like,
well, you only have to do that for one more season, though.
I know. Like,
I'm impressed.
Finally.
I'm so impressed. I can't. Like, the second... even if I love a majority of the characters, if, like, one of them or two of them rubs me the wrong way too bad, I can't. I'm also one of those people where if I have more anxiety going into the episode... That's the reason I stopped watching Glee. I would go into an episode super anxious and then come out a hot mess of anger or pain, and it was just like, this isn't worth it. I can't put myself through that anymore. It's too much pain. And that's how this show kind of became for me, which is why I stopped.
And it was just Lexa that triggered that for a lot of people, and that's why no one's watching.
It was even before Lexa. Like, it was just so rough getting through some of these episodes. Like, after Hakodama... Seeing the fact that Bellamy did that, and then the outcome of all of it, and just the downhill destruction the show was already careening towards, I was just like, but I still watched for Lexa.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of Lexa, and I was like, and then, I was like giving myself a few weeks. I was like, I'm going to give myself a few weeks to get over this, and maybe I'll start catching back up. And then I found out about Lincoln, and I was like, nope, I can't. I can't.
I completely agree. I just hold on with, like, all my might, hanging off a cliff, like, trying to keep these characters alive. So that's the only reason I...
Fan fiction. Start reading fan fiction. Your characters will stay alive and well in fan fiction.
You can be happy in fan fiction if you want it to be.
So.
I'm just in it for the completionist.
Yeah.
I have no attachment beyond... I mean, there are characters I like, but obviously there's some very fiery passion amongst this panel, and I don't think I equal the... I don't have that passion about the show, so I just don't have that passion about the characters or going forward. But I will still watch it. I'll just be watching it somewhat reluctantly.
I will eagerly await to hear your thoughts on the show, and maybe if I feel the need to roast the show more, I'll watch it, or at least listen to analyses from other people, and I'll be like, hey, I Tumblr watched and I listened. I'll sit here and roast with you, despite. We'll see. I'll tell you how I feel then.
Fair enough. With that said, then...
I know it's so dark on set now.
I know. With that said, at this time, I would like to thank Kelsey, Selene, and Allie for joining me to talk about the 100 seasons 1 through 3. The next time you hear from the 100 panel, however it may ultimately shape up, will be after season 4 airs. At that time, we'll know whether or not the show has also been renewed. Not so many of us think it's probably going to happen. Now, if you're familiar with our podcast, you should probably realize that I've been adding this little tagline conclusion. So I'm going to say that CPU, exclamation point, was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, and hails from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, Take the time to rate us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Google Play. Give us some stars. We like 5, preferably. Comment on YouTube so that we can spread the word more effectively. Get the word out about Couch Potatoes Unite. If you like what you hear and we have fun doing it, tell others about it. That's how this whole thing works. If you have suggestions on shows we might consider, contact us at our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, where you can subscribe, via email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, or via Facebook and Twitter. And of course, we're available on all those social media sites and audio feed places. We're adding new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time. We have several more new episodes coming down the pike. As I said in the intro, they're available and searchable via the web because we are literally everywhere. Make sure you subscribe to the blog, our channels, our social media accounts. Stay up on new events and episodes. Until that time, if you want to catch up on the 100, seasons 1 through 3 is currently streamable on Netflix. Until next time, keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned. Bye.